Okay, it's 6:32. Today is January 16th, 2018. I call to order the Board of Directors for Trophy Club Municipal Utility District Number 1. We do have a quorum. Everybody is here. So I'll go to the first, citizens' comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to address the board on any matter, whether or not it is posted on the agenda. The board is not permitted to take action on or discuss any questions made to the board at this time concerning an item not listed on the agenda. The board will hear presentations on specific agenda items prior to the board addressing those items. You may speak up to 3 minutes or the time limit determined by the president or presiding officer. We have any comments?
No.
Okay. Consent agenda. All matters listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine by Board of Directors and will be enacted by one motion. There will not be a separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Item 1, consider and take appropriate action to approve the consent agenda. A, December 2017 check register. B, December 19, 2017 regular meeting minutes. C, quarterly investment report, first quarter, fiscal year 2018. D, tax collection, first quarter, fiscal year 2018. I myself would like to remove 1B, December 19, 2017 regular meeting minutes. Does anyone else have any other items to remove? I see none, so I'll take a motion on 1A, C, and D.
Move to approve consent item agendas A, C, and D.
Thank you. I have a motion by Secretary Treasurer Rose and a second by Director Thomas. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. We'll vote on the consent agenda. All in favor, show of hands. I have Secretary Treasurer Rose, Director Hayes, Director Thomas, myself, and Vice President Wilson. Okay, all opposed? I see none. Okay, we'll go to B, December 19, 2017 regular minutes. You have the revisions on in front of you. I would just like one change from these revisions on the order number. It was posted as 2019. We mentioned it in the meeting. It was corrected, and the motion was made for 2017.
What
That
item,
was,
what item are you
10.
looking at?
It was, I believe it was on item 10. Is that correct?
No. I made the change.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry. I made the change. It is item number 3, the contract number.
But it was item 10, the agenda item 10, correct?
Initially, I corrected item number 10, the motion. However, there was an additional change made after you and I spoke to item number 3 for clarification about the contract number.
Okay. Does everybody understand? It was posted as 2019 121.9B, I believe.
No, what?
And then the motion was actually, was in discussion, it was corrected, and the motion was made 2017. Okay? I just want, and then you have the amended minutes. Does anyone have any questions on these? Okay, I see none, so I make a motion to approve consent agenda, or item number 1B, December 19th, 2017, regular meeting minutes.
Second.
Okay, I have a second by Secretary Treasurer Rose. All in favor, show of hands. Show of hands, thank you. Okay, I have Director Hayes, Secretary Treasurer Rose, Director Thomas, myself, and Vice President Wilson. All in favor, all opposed. I see none. We'll move on. Excuse me? Okay. Okay, regular session. 2, receive update from Audit Committee. Okay, the Audit Committee is Secretary Treasurer Rose and Vice President Wilson. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, do you have any words of wisdom?
No, we walked through the budget that you see, that's been set before you. The audit, I'm sorry, not budget, but the audit that's been set before you. Very minor changes, mostly points of clarification, but nothing of any material significance. And our auditor will have a presentation where he will walk through it.
Okay, Director Rose, do you have any?
No additional
Secretary
comments.
Treasurer? Okay. You want to do your song and dance? Okay, just state your name before and the firm you with.
Good evening, Board. Mr. Carr. Rod Abbott, Audit Partner with LaFollette and Abbott CPAs. Here to present the audit results for the MUD for 2017. This presentation will just hit the highlights at a very high level, but as we go through, if you have any specific questions, feel free to interrupt me as we go along. Okay. You have the final bound portions of the audit in front of you in a loose letter. The loose letter discussion comes towards the end. As we go through the bound portion of the audit, you will see some page numbers referenced in the PowerPoint presentation if you do want to refer to those. Okay. As far as the agenda, we'll go over the objectives and scope of the audit, of course, the financial statements and highlights, overview of the results, and required government's communications. Of course, like every year, the objective is to conduct the audit in accordance with government auditing standards and plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are free of material misstatement. It is a full scope audit, so we look at all of your funds and all of your governmental activities, so nothing is excluded. Okay, audit package, where to find what? If you're particularly interested in any particular area of the bound portion audit, you have management discussion and analysis is 3 through 10. The government-wide financials, that includes all of your long-term debt and property, plant, and equipment, is 11 and 12. Fund statements, 13 through 16, et cetera. The notes will go into a lot of detail about your assets, debt, et cetera. Budget versus actual results, page 41. And report on compliance and internal controls is the very last thing. Okay. Okay, so for the first financials are the government-wide financials that again include all of the value of your water lines, your plant and equipment, and your long-term debts. And so once you net those things with some deferred inflows and outflows too, the total MUD net position came in at $22.9 million, which is a healthy increase from the year before, at 16.8% of $3.3 million. And just a little over $5 million of the net position is unrestricted, a healthy rebound from the year before of $1.6 million, mainly because you used a significant amount of unrestricted funds for capital improvements the year before. And so that was one of the things that led to that increase. And of course, you had a new debt issuance in 2017, $4,635,000. So your total debt did increase also with your assets from $19.9 million to $23.1 million. The fund financial statements, the way you operate on a daily basis is the fund financials, the general fund unassigned balance, which is a balance that you have to assign in the future, commit, etc. Also had a good increase for the year, 4.26 million versus 2.47 the year before. In revenues and expenditures, you see the expenditures is 6.7 million compared to the 8.56 the year before. That's another indicator of the extra capital outlay expenditures that you had the year before. And that, combined with a good revenue increase of 1.55 million due to increased wastewater and water collections, again, are just other factors that led to the healthy rebound with your financial results for 2017. So you got increases in net position and unassigned fund balance. So what does that mean? Well, the unassigned fund balance at the end of 2017 was equal to 6.3 months of the 2017's expenditures. And so the Governmental Finance Officers Association gives a little guidance to local governments about minimum unassigned fund balance. They say 2 months is like a good minimum. You know, you don't want to go below that, and this is for cities and other local governments like the MUD. And so you're way above the 2 months minimum. Now, they don't set any maximum. It's just a minimum that they set to where the local government needs to improve it. And so you're way above that. As far as how high it needs to be, well, that all depends on the local government situation. And again, you have new debt, and you have a lot of capital projects going on right now, and so I think that's something to take into consideration.
Let me ask you a question.
Go ahead, Joe.
We have a objective of having unassigned fund balance at 50% of the expenditures for a given year, like 17. If I read this correctly, the expenditures were 6.7 million, and the unassigned balance was 4.26. That appears to me to be more than 50%.
I think we also took in consideration your transfers out of the general fund, which helped assist the debt service fund. And so the debt service fund didn't have enough revenues to cover all the debt service, and so you had budgeted for a pretty big transfer out. And so we took that in coming up with this number, we took that in consideration as far as not being an annual operating expense, but sort of a required transfer contribution to the debt service fund. Does that make sense, sir? We added that transfer number to the expense.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
Right, I'm pleased with the number, particularly versus last year, because we've tried to put a lot of emphasis on it. But just a general question for you. You commented it's kind of different for various entities depending upon what's going on. But in the audits that you do for other companies, how does that 6 months stack up with other companies that you've done their audits for?
Yeah, we do a lot more cities than municipal utility districts. But the cities that we serve, it's a wide range. You know, some have less than 1 month, and some have, I think the best we have is around 8 months.
So we're kind of on the high end of the spectrum.
Just as our firm in general, you know, I think if our cities stay within 3 to 6 months, we tell that they're in good shape, unless there's some extraordinary circumstance or a big foreseen capital outlay that they have to make.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. As far as the general fund budget of water and sewer revenue was too optimistic, led to a $625,000 negative variance and an overall revenue variance of 1.07 million, but this is more than offset by positive expense variances, particularly in the water and fire departments, that total 1.95 million. And so overall, you had a good, healthy budget versus actual experience on the general fund. And so, from talking to management, I think this is not the first time this has happened, but you might consider near the end of the year, if you want to amend the budget, get it more in line with what's actually going on. It might help you with the future planning for the MUD. It just depends on how you think the actuals of any particular year is going to compare to the coming. Now, for the capital projects fund, again, the district, as you know, continues with expansion of plant and operations. Another $3.5 million expended with construction in progress going up to 14.1 million at the end of the year. Excuse me. So that's the financial highlights. As far as the audit opinion and audit results, again, the MUD is receiving a clean opinion, which is what all of your bondholders, the TCQ and everybody else wants to see, so no issues there. In the very back of the audit, we have an internal control report, so if we noted any internal control matters, or if we noted any non-compliance with the TCQ or things that were not fixed, so to speak, by management, it would be noted there, but nothing there. That's another clean report. And there are only 4 audit adjustments, and so me as an auditor, anytime we're in single digits on audit adjustments, we're pretty happy. So 4 audit adjustments is really good. None of the misstatements that were identified by us, the audit firm, were material. Actually, they're very immaterial. And actually, 3 of the 4 audit adjustments were provided by Renee and Stephen. So we were very happy with that. As we went through the audit process and we vouched invoices, et cetera, made inquiries, we noted that none of the transactions were unusual in nature or unexplainable. And then required governance communications. You, the board, are the governance. Since you're not on site during the audit process and are out of the loop, so to speak, the loose letter that you see with the bound portion of the audit is a required AICPA letter. Just required communications saying things like there was no difficulties encountered during the audit process, that us and management were on the same page as far as the audit adjustments. And of course, we had no disagreements with management or anybody during the audit process. So that's the highlights. Again, we would like to thank the audit committee for doing a thorough review of the draft and getting their feedback. Mr. Carmen, Mr. Krolsek? Krolsek?
Just call him Stephen.
Krolsek. Try to be a little more formal during the meetings. You know. And for the final time, Ms. Gonzalez.
She's not here.
Did she not make it?
No.
She told us she was going to make it. Well, again, we
You know
did-
those retired people.
I know it.
They don't know, they don't have a calendar or a clock.
Well, it's been a pleasure working with her over the years, and it was a pleasure working with Stephen this year too, and we wish her the best. And
I just have one question,
Uh-huh.
and I hope not to embarrass Director Hayes. There was a statement by a resident on Facebook that one of the directors, took money, or not take money, but, spent money. How was it phrased, Jim? You remember you know what I'm talking about?
I don't even recall what it said, Kevin.
It alluded that, a director took money or something like that, placed it somewhere else. You didn't find any of that?
no, sir.
Okay, just wanted, for the record.
What did I take? I forgot.
It was millions or something.
Millions?
Yeah. But hopefully you spent it well. Okay,
Well, if it's we would be in trouble for that.
Yeah.
If we missed that. So
yeah, they just made it, one of these off-the-cuff statements that, on social network. Secretary Treasurer Rose, do you have anything?
No.
Director Hayes, do you have any addition?
No.
Director Thomas? Vice President Wilson?
No.
Okay, I have nothing myself. I guess we don't need to accept the audit or anything, right, Tony?
Yeah. I'll give you a motion.
Because it says receive update, it doesn't have, oh yeah, okay.
Appropriate action.
My bad. Thanks,
I
that's why you're here
move-
to keep me in line. Okay, I'll take a motion to accept the 2017. You have another question?
No, I have a motion.
Okay, go ahead. You made a motion?
Yeah.
Okay, I have a
I move
motion.
to accept the fiscal 2017 annual financial audit performed by LaFlette and Company PLLC.
Okay,
I'll second it.
and that's on agenda number 3. We have a motion by Secretary Treasurer Rose and a second by Vice President Wilson. Any other discussion? I see none. All in favor, show of hands. Unanimous. All opposed, I see none. Okay, it passes. Thank you very much, Rod. Nice seeing you again.
Congratulations,
Yeah.
Stephen.
Have a cold evening.
When you're down.
Okay, we're now at number 4. Consider and take appropriate action regarding water line interconnect alignment study conducted by Half and Associates. Close that presentation on the computer up here.
That 14 is it?
Okay, let's go on the ass.
Yeah, I think they were gonna bring several copies of it. You're looking for a hard copy?
Oh, good enough.
Here it comes.
Thank you.
Say again?
All right, thank you.
Probably.
Yeah.
Let's put it down here.
Yeah. Well, you did that. You directed the meeting. Don't worry
Well, you
about it.
guys said didn't have anything.
I did. I said something. Drop the ball, man.
Okay,
Okay,
just state your name for the record.
sure. Yeah, good evening. My name is Brian Haynes. I'm with Half Associates, and I've got Leah Hodge, my associate here, is with me as well. We put up a couple boards right here, but everything should be able to be seen on the PowerPoint. This basically summarizes, it's the cliff notes essentially for the report I think we just handed out. So I'll just step through it. If you have any questions, just let me know. We can stop at any point, and we'll go from there if that's okay.
Sure.
Yep. Okay, we'll get through this as quick as I can. We'll talk about, what the issue is, the objections there, and the assumptions. Why are we doing this? What are we gonna do about it? And kind of what are the assumptions we've made along the way. We'll also talk about alignments. We looked at several alignments to get this interconnect from one place to the other. Who we'll have to coordinate with. Of course, we'll get to the cost estimates of what each alignment cost. And we'll kind of go over our evaluation of the cost and the alignments. And then, of course, we'll provide a recommendation. So, let's see here. So, the main issue is the high pump service station. And I've got a pointer here, so I might, let's see, does that work on there? No, it doesn't work. Basically, up here, we want to get the water from this point to the elevated storage tank off by the new city hall. It's as simple as that. How we do that, that's what this presentation is about. Why do we need to get improve the capacity between the high service pump station and the elevated storage tank? Yes.
You dim the lights, then you can use this pointer.
Yeah. What is that? Okay, is that why? Yeah. Why did it?
Mr. Andrew, I forget Andrew's last name. Freeman, it's gonna-
Well, there's a switch that keeps these lights on.
Why is it only
Let's
two?
do it again. But, yeah, but at the end of the day, we need to go forward with an application that's.
That's weird. It's skipping all this.
Just use that one, and then he can use his pointer over here. That's fine. Can you see if your pointer works on this one over
Okay.
here?
I think the screen absorb it. You know what? I can use the cursor right here. You can see
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
For some reason, it's skipping. I may have to do this, skipping all the slides, but let me go back up here. So the objectives are to see the most feasible route between the high service pump station, right outside the building here, to the eastern storage tank over there by the new city hall. And the primary factors we're going to look at, of course, cost. Cost drives everything typically, so of course we're going to look at that first. But in addition to that, what are the existing easements and what easements would we need? In other words, the more easements we have to obtain, the longer process and more expensive it can get. We want minimum interruption to the MUD customers. We also want to consider where the existing utilities are because, like I've been saying, we are the last people at the dinner table. If you look at the route, it is chock full of housing, roads, utilities, so we've got to maneuver through that. So that's what's makes this so complicated. And then we also want, once this is in the ground, I want Mike to be able to access it, so we don't want to put it in an odd location so there's no access. Let's see, so there's that graphic I showed earlier. So we did make some assumptions. Some of the assumptions we made is basically the beginning and end do have similar alignments. It's the middle portion that we may change alignments is the primary differences. The developer, and when I talk about developer, I'm talking about this track here. Y'all are very familiar with the Trophy Club Town Center, I suspect, right out here off Trophy Club Drive. Right here, that developer has made a commitment to build this portion of the line. So that's an important factor. And yes, Carl?
Brian, let me just interject and remind folks that Half and Associates designed already, it's in the can, the alignment from the tanks down to the southeast side of Trophy Club Drive, right? So
That's correct.
that part of this design is already done and is a common alignment to all of the alternatives considered in this study.
That's correct. No, I appreciate that. So that portion is designed. We did this without the benefit of a survey. We thought we could go forward with a survey, but which survey do you do? Do you do all 4 alignments? And that's just cost prohibitive, and we didn't want to waste the district's money on that. So we used record drawings, met with the town, received information from TxDOT, discussed what they're doing on 114. So we did quite a bit of due diligence up front. So that's what we're going to present tonight. One of the substance, we're trying to minimize utility conflicts, of course, and like I mentioned before, minimize disruption to customers and residents in the town. And when we state that it's open, other than open cut, basically that's being a bore with a casing pipe. That's usually done at roads and driveways where we have to traverse under one of those. Directional drilling, we did have to consider some directional drilling off of 114. I'll show you some graphics. There are so many utilities along there. We couldn't even put a bucket in the ground without hitting something. So you have to directional drill between the utilities. So that's, when we talk about directional drilling, that's what we're talking about there. We did make an assumption if there is an easement to purchase, we assume $5 a square foot. It could be any number, but that's just an average we think would be
Right.
feasible. Yes, sir.
Did your locations for directional drilling increase the cost that eventually showed up? In other words, directional drilling more expensive?
Definitely. Yeah, directional drilling is around $450 a foot. So yeah, it's very expensive. And I'll basically the option along the northern edge of 114 is where we have to utilize that. And I'll show you the graphic where there's 6 or 7 utilities. We're just trying to go right between. Really, we're not going to be under it, but we'd be between those units. So that's what we mean there. I think with that particular option, once we get a survey done and once we do a subsurface utility location, know exactly where it is, we could probably bring that cost down. Yeah, that's what we want to do. At this point, we can't. We've got record drawings and whatnot. But yes, that's what that would be. And it is a lot more expensive. I'll go back to here. So what is the real issue? This should be in your report. Yeah, I don't think this could, yeah. Let me point here with my cursor. Right here is the issue. So the red line is the eastern storage tank. Again, over there by the new city hall, new town hall. Right here, this graphic is the percent full of the tank. So right about here is 100% full. So it's full all the way to the top. You know, of course, all the way down here is 0% full. And then this scale on the bottom is over time. So this is a 24-hour period. This is going to be in the summer. This is going to be when everybody's watering their lawns, it's maximum demand, so it would not occur in the winter. So what this shows, we had CP&Y did this in their, yes, sir.
I'm sorry, just let me interject.
Sure.
So I had asked CPNY as a part of this process. They had worked through the modeling on this project previously, but we assigned the work to HAF to do the preliminary alignment study. I guess one thing I want to just bring up here is when you see 5% full at the bottom of that red dip, that means what? It's 5 feet off the ground, there's 5% of water left in the bowl.
5% left in the bowl, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the water is still up there
Right.
and the head pressure is available.
Correct.
Also, when the flat line piece of this graph is there, what we're talking about was the ultimate build-out demand associated with that model. And that ultimate build-out demand has been discussed by this board for its, assumptions.
Right.
Were those reasonable assumptions? Were they excessively conservative assumptions? But effectively, you've evaluated these alternative alignments against the very same model
Right.
that was in our study from 2016.
That's correct.
And so, one
Yes, sir.
point of clarification, this was not based on any modeling you've done or any, you just took this from another study and assumed it was a fact.
Right, and we did coordinate with CP&Y, and there's some other slides where we did get some model updates based on the alignment. So they provided 2 alignments in the study that they did in 2016. So we had added an additional 2 to 3, and so we had them model those scenarios just to make sure that there's apples to apples. So, but yes, we did coordinate that, and they're aware of that. We looked at their information, and they actually helped us generate some additional charts just to make sure the demand is there. So, and so the red line is the eastern tank. The green line, for reference, is the western tank out there along near the high school. So it doesn't have any issues with demand. It's the eastern tank because the line is just simply isn't big enough. I mean, it goes from a 14 to 12 to 8. It just gets smaller and smaller. And that's just how the system is at this time. So that's the objective. Yes, sir.
That was an assumption for a full build-out, or is that actual demands?
This is assuming full build-out, which we're just about there with their, I believe I heard, 40 houses left or 80 in the town, but this would be a full build-out.
And so you would expect some fluctuation, of course.
Right.
And this shows 5%. What would be the recommended percentage to still have remaining at full build-out?
Right. Yeah, well, we're trying to get it as close as we can to the western tank, so we're trying to get it up in the 60 range, in the 60% range. So, and that's about as good as we can get it without spending an extra exorbitant amount of money. So, so in the mid-60s is the objective there. So that's where we sit today. Yes, sir.
Apologize. Mike, do you recall, I'm asking you kind of do it off the top of your head, but do you recall what the actuals were this summer?
I don't recall. I mean, I will just say during a normal day in the summer, I'll fill up the west tank. It'll shut off every day, and I'm still pumping to the east tank. I mean, it's a daily occurrence.
But you don't recall how low the east tank is getting during this past summer?
I mean, it'll get below 30 feet. It'll be down in the 20s.
What would that be percentage-wise? Do you have a sense? Is it below half full in the bowl?
It'll get down to almost half full.
So right now it's getting
How
about,
many other pumps I kick on?
so right now it's getting to about 50%.
Yeah.
From an operational perspective, there is often a need to deep cycle your storage for water quality purposes. And so it's not an uncommon thing to actually try to push that storage up and down just to make sure your water is fresh. The behavior you see there near a max day is really kind of being up against the wall and not quite being able to fill it back up again. So it's a little bit different sort of system behavior.
Right. So so just to clarify, so we did not do any modeling. We basically took what CP&Y did. But again, we did go back, and I will show you that they did go back and revise some of their modeling to reflect some of the new alignments we came up with. So, the first alignment, let me see if I can get it to full screen here and keep it that way. There we go. Okay, so the first alignment, what we call the Indian Creek alignment, which guess what, goes along Indian Creek. This right here is the actual mud building right here. If you look at the cursor up here on the screen, any of the screens here, it goes right here along the northern edge of the Methodist Church, hits Trophy Club Drive, and then it goes along Indian Creek the rest of the route until this cul-de-sac, and then it traverses down south behind the Baylor Medical Center. And then we make our way back to 114, and then we get back up to the new location of the city hall, kind of go behind the city hall and out to the actual tank.
What cul-de-sac is that, Mike?
I believe it's either gonna be, I think it's Valleywood.
Valleywood.
Right, it's before that cul-de-sac. It's basically, there's a driveway that takes you behind the duplexes at that point, so it's right before that cul-de-sac right there.
Oh, okay, maybe he's going right along the townhomes end.
Yeah, the townhomes, yeah, it's right
So
there.
it goes in the townhomes or the cul-de-sac after the townhomes?
It goes to the driveway, just past the townhomes. There's a driveway to get to the back of the townhome,
Right.
just right through that driveway.
Okay, so it's not a cul-de-sac then?
Right, it doesn't go through the cul-de-sac. It's before, I misspoke if I said that. It's before this cul-de-sac right here.
That's Valleywood.
Yeah, I think it is Valleywood.
Okay.
So that's basically alignment A. If you compare it to the CP&Y study, they actually went down Municipal Drive and then went south on Trophy Club Drive. They had a few different variations. So this is an updated model that we had CP&Y do just last week. So this is updated.
Yeah, that's before we got the easement in the church.
Correct. Yeah, this reflects the new easement and what we're doing over there. So that's absolutely correct. Got a few graphics to kind of show everybody a typical section wherever we're at. This is alignment A along Indian Creek. The north, so this is looking east, so north would be over here on your left, south would be on your right. The existing line along Indian Creek Drive is 14-inch, and it's actually in the parkway. In other words, it's between the back curb and the fence. And we had this rendering generated, and if you took a snapshot or picture, it should look very similar to this. But it's a divided road, one lane each direction. What we would propose, if we went this route, would be to put an 18-inch water line right here under this outside lane. You could do this and even leave traffic going each direction. So we would be, the biggest cost here besides the pipe would be replace that road. So that's a part of this option for alignment A. That's the most problematic part of this, is we're going along that road, and there's really no other corridor to go if we go this route. We have to stay within the road.
Why can't you go in the grass off to the south?
You could, but we have to keep the existing 14-inch line in service, so we'd have to, there's just not enough room to put two lines.
It's under the striped part of the road, the 14-inch line?
The 14-inch line is under the grass. Yeah,
Okay.
and we would propose the new line to go under the stripe portion. We've got to keep the 14-inch line in service while we install the new one. So that's why we didn't do that.
And why couldn't it go on the grass on the north side?
You could, but again, that's extremely tight up there too. And there's also utilities.
There's cable.
And there is sewer, I believe.
Some sewer, not much.
Yeah, there is some sewer, some cross sections. The median, of course, is not an option because there's a storm drain in the majority of the median. But even if we did put it on the north side, let's say in the grass, you're gonna have to tear up a portion of that road just to get it in there. It's just a very narrow corridor. It's about 9 feet. As this graphic kind of shows right here, 9 feet. So with 9 feet, there's not a lot to work with. So we would be tearing up, even if we went on the north, we'd be tearing up a portion of the road anyway.
Okay, so that's a 14-inch line, is that correct?
Correct, the existing
And-
line is.
And what, on page 4, you mentioned a 16-inch line alongside north side of Fellowship United Methodist and then continues under Trophy Club. Is that 16 up there?
It's 16, and then it's an 18 once you get to Indian Creek Drive.
Well, that's proposed. 18.
Proposed, right.
But what's on page 4, the alignment is 16 and, okay, 18. Right now, though, it's a 14.
Right.
Going down there, and it goes all the way to that turn in, but past the townhomes there.
It does, and then it necks down, past that townhome, it necks down to a smaller size, go to the previous slide.
10 or something.
Yeah, see right here, it's a 10, then it goes to an 8.
Yeah, it
There's
goes
the
all
8, so
different.
it keeps
But
continuing.
that doesn't come into play. where
Right.
you're tapping off, so.
Correct.
You would go 18 all the way down.
All the way to the tank.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, yes, sir. So that, I just wanted to show you all that graphic to show how tight that corridor is. Yes, sir.
I have a question on this particular screenshot. Looking at the CP&Y study, they said replacement of the line,
Right.
not just a parallel line. They were talking about a replacement.
Right.
And they were talking about an 18-inch replacement line down Indian Creek, the distance, because they were going to remove the other lines. And if we went a parallel line, in this case, and leaving it, we went parallel line outside on 114 and we dropped down to a 16-inch. And I can remember that, watching that discussion from the seats.
Right.
And they said there was absolutely no reason to go an 18-inch line out there, that the 16 was going to cover it. So I have two questions.
Right.
Why the change from replacement, and why the 18-inch going through here rather than a 16?
I'll clarify. We could do a replacement. There are interconnects that, about 15 interconnects. In other words, the 6 and 8-inch lines that feed laterals that are off that 14. So you got to replace every one of those. So that's an extremely costly, and then there's a lot of downtime with the customers in that area. Also, good point. We did have CP&Y go back and look. If we do a parallel line to the 14, you can downsize that line to maybe potentially a 16 or a 14. So for the purpose of this presentation, we've got it still as an 18, which would cover the, we could abandon the 14, and the 18 would be the maximum we would have to put in there. So for the cost estimate purposes, I just put it in the worst case scenario here. We could probably downsize that to a 16, maybe a 14, if we keep the 14-inch.
Okay, let me ask you a question. If I'm going through and tearing up folks' front yard, or I'm tearing up the street in front of their house, and I'm putting in a line, why would I not do a replacement rather than what we've got shown here, besides cost? Because I'll agree that the cost will be greater as you pull and tap back in as you go along.
Sure.
But if you're looking at that 18-inch line as a possible backup to a failure of the other line, you're going to have to come back in and tear the streets back up and tie back into it.
Right. The 18 can actually function independently without the 14.
Yes.
So
But would you be getting water to the neighborhoods, or would you just be getting water to the elevated tank?
Didn't you mention it would reduce downtime to the residents if you kept the 14 intact?
Can I-
And you put
Right. Yeah.
Okay, the reason why we did this is because there's so many connections. Brian said about 15. There's probably, I don't know, I would say probably about 30 off of that. And we're going to be putting in brand new C900. That existing 14 is AC. So every time you come up, okay, there's taps off for Hogan's Glen, then Brook Hollow. I mean, just so many taps off of that. You're transitioning from AC to C900 on each one of those. And we're probably dewatering probably about half of Indian Creek up to Trophywood every time we do those interconnects. And that's cutting a lot of people out of water. So we decided against that, because every time you come up there and do that interconnect, that's downtime, that's sampling time, making sure everything, all the samples are coming back good and everything before we actually put the new line in service. So it's going to be a lot of time, and there's going to be people out of water for an extended amount of time.
Well, yeah, but when you say that, you're not talking about months. What you're talking about is I'm going to shut it down for 2 hours while I reconnect the pipe here and reconnect the pipe there. You're going to have a backup pipeline as you run along and do the construction.
Probably
Right?
days.
Will
You have to
probably
wait
be
for the
days.
bacteria samples to come back.
Oh, I see.
Well,
Right.
just to dewater that line, it'll probably take a good at least half a day, if not longer, to dewater that line.
would you save would you save a significant amount of money by doing that?
Right, it's $250,000 to $300,000 difference. So if you go through with this 18 and you create all the interconnects, and you connect it back, the 20, 30, how many ever connects, that adds about $300,000 in cost. So that's a
So the
savings.
difference between replacing and just going with a net new is about two or
Right,
300,000.
Right, because we're trying to keep, the primary objective is to make the connection between here at the office all the way to the eastern tank. And also it actually improves the hydraulics not to have a bunch of interconnects to it and keep the 14 intact. So
What's
that was, and we can go either, and to your point, we can go either way. We could go back, again, when I look at a cost estimate, I want to put worst case scenarios in there. We could probably get the 18 would completely replace the 14, and we could go back with the interconnects, but it adds more cost.
The number I had, and it's probably for a much smaller line than the 18 line, was when we do like Pebble Beach and those type operations, it seemed to me that cost was like $225 a linear foot. And this 18, I think, is $175. So that would give you a good feeling, I think, on possible cost addition. I do have another question on the route on this, if you could go back to the route page. When you get down to the area where we're doing to the interconnect down to Warden 114, move your cursor to your left. Yeah, right through there. I was wondering why the line comes parallel to the hotel there and comes out to the street rather than following the neighborhood backyards and going directly to the east. There's a difference in line length of over 900 foot on that. So I was wondering why we went back out to 114.
Right, and we did look at that, if I get this, so you're talking about going back through here?
Yes.
Yeah,
Hotels and-
Actually,
behind all the commercial area and between the residences.
Yes.
We don't have an easement, with more easement, and
I think
once
a
we get
lot
to
of-
114, we have easements and we're in the clear. We can either stay in the easement along 114, or we can stay along the easement for the road along this area. So we're just trying to stay as much public easement. And it does add some length to the pipe by doing that. So
It's about, I don't remember, I'd have to
I think
go
we
to another
wanted to
page.
pick
It's
up
over 900 foot it adds.
where that 12 inches going across 114, feeding the Solana area over there. I think the reason why, because we wanted to pick up that 12 inch off of that 18, just to make
That
sure
was another-
we're
that-
pushing enough water over that way also.
that was another reason too. Right here, this goes over to Solana, over here, the Westlake portion. That was to also feed that as well.
We're not doing anything with that particular line under that road, are we,
No.
on this option?
Not with this option.
Okay.
No, it stays a 12. That shows as an 8, but it's really a 12.
And
I
that would
don't-
allow
I
better
per- I-
access too.
I personally
As far
don't
as
think
we
an
go.
easement along the back of those neighborhoods would be a particular problem, in that when you change usages in Trophy Club, you have to have a 40-foot buffer. And if we were in that buffer, I don't think we'd have too much of a problem. But here
And-
again, you have to look at the costs.
Right, and I wouldn't have a problem, assuming we can make this connection like Mike is talking about, to explore that once we get into full design. That's not that big of alignment change. We just want to pick one of these A, B, C, D
Gotcha.
alignments. And then we can, I agree, if that seems to be the most cost-effective way and we can get the easements, we'll do that for sure. And you're right, with the building setbacks and whatnot, they can't use that area anyway against the fence or near the fence.
Yeah, But
Yeah, it's good.
again, with the accessibility of it, it's better to go down 114 like you have
Right.
than try and work out of a hotel, parking lot, because you have the Hampton Inn there.
We'd actually be north of it.
Excuse me?
You would actually be north of the Hampton. There's another
By the
lot
time you
through.
do the setback off the development that's there, and then the parking lot in the Hampton, there's not a lot.
Yeah.
So we can look at both directions and see
Okay.
what is
If
best.
we
and-
go with option A.
Yeah, and then if you would, just give us a price on the 14, versus the 18, like,
Sure. Sure,
Mr. Rose just mentioned.
yes. Okay, well, that makes sense. So B, the big change, we call this the State Highway 114 route, 114 north, that is. The first portion of this, we go by the Methodist Church, across traffic, same thing. This portion across the Trophy Club Town Center, which is this area right here, would be funded by that developer. They've already made a commitment to the district to fund that. They have easements in place. That's a big plus. So that they would put that line in up to, if you can picture, there's a creek right about here off 114. They'll stop right there at the edge of their property. So that's a big plus to get this paid for up to almost the Brook Hollow Lane right there. So, but then it stays along the northern side of 114. According to the hydraulic study, need to make a connection right here back to the 14-inch line. We also need to make a connection back up to the 14-inch line up here at this point as well.
That
So-
offsets the contribution by PD
Right.
30.
Right, it does, it creates the parallel line by doing that. So, this stays completely along 114, has these two connections like I mentioned, and then again, the same route along Trophywood Drive, back up to the tank. And I'll show you, the next slide will be the actual typical section. Again, imagine yourself standing, facing, it says westbound, but that's traffic, but facing Dallas, facing east. Y'all probably seen they've got the sound wall that's going up. There's the big transmission lines that have been there forever. So this, over here on the left-hand side of that slide, this shows how much is in there. And this is what causes the directional drilling that somebody had mentioned before. We are so close to underground electric, to the wall, fiber optics, you name it, that in certain areas, we're gonna have to drill underneath. We won't ever cross it, because we need access to it, but underneath to install that line. Now, when we go back and we locate this, and part of the cost estimate does include getting subsurface utility locates. In other words, they'll go back and they'll tone these lines. We'll work with the utility companies. We have a group with a vac truck that'll go down. We'll know exactly where we're at. And if there's more room, then we can eliminate some of these directional drills and go with open cut, which is always preferable because we're looking at cost, get down to that 175 per foot, opposed to nearly 500. So again, I'm just trying to put in there, I want the maximum in there. I want you to come back to you when we go to construction with a number that's less than what I'm showing you. So that's why we're showing you a considerable amount of directional drilling, but I think we can take that down with this alignment if that's the alignment we choose. We did look alignment B interim, which basically we would construct this part along the western side up to Trophy Club, actually up to Hogan's Drive. And then we would make these two connections I mentioned earlier at right here for the 14-inch, and there's a church right here. And then we'll make this connection by Baylor Medical right over here. So basically on the interim, it's a portion of line. The only portion we're missing is what would be built by the developer here anyway, this portion right here across that 30 acres. And then we would not have this portion here. So that was another alignment. I've got cost. I can show you. It really doesn't reduce the cost a whole lot. It's just this is a really ugly portion where we've got these utilities. That's that typical sections right in this area. So we just threw this out there as an idea of reducing costs and to make it more affordable for the district. So we're just trying to look at anything we can, different options.
Brian, if I could, that
Yes, sir.
that was really my suggestion. None of that,
Right.
none of that Sir stuff, no chocolate for you.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if we can't afford a $6 million pipeline, then the question was, is there a phased approach that allows us to put in part of it now and part of it later and still meet our objectives in the short term? That was something I requested.
Right, that's correct. And I can show you the cost difference here.
Well, if I
Yes,
could,
sir.
well, I noticed on that the elevated tank storage future max day does not recover as well as it does with the other options.
That's correct. That's correct. The report
other
reflects
option,
that. Yeah, it only recovers about 35%, if I remember correctly, opposed to the mid-60s. So, and that would be an interim condition. So it is an improvement. It's a 30% improvement. But you would need this last leg to fulfill the actual objective here. That's a good point. Then we did also look at an alternative to B. So this would be constructing the full B, but we call this B1. But we would cross to the south side of 114 and then with a bore, and then go over here. You know, we thought, okay, if you go over there and you drive, and I've lived here 40 years, it's the Circle T Ranch and all that, it's open space. It's not. I mean, there's TRA lines, there's so much underground stuff. Over here on this west side, this basically became not feasible, and including the fact that we have to bore all of 114. That's a cost right there.
Let me ask you about the 14-inch line. Is it possible to put an 18-inch line a foot away from that, or 6 inches away from the 14? Keep the 14 working, but get basically in the same hole, put an 18-inch line in.
We would need, there are connections, like the 20 to 30 connections Mike talked about, that would be, and we'd have to go below it. So it couldn't be at the same vertical, but you could go below it. But I would still want at least 5-10 feet separation, just because of the equipment. Contractors aren't perfect. You know, they're out there with these big pieces of equipment. I'd hate to hit that 14. So yeah, you couldn't hug the side to keep it in the grassed area, if that's what you're talking about, along Indian Creek. So that would be that's a good idea, but I think it'd be extremely difficult just for the contractor. So
Another concern I would have, if something caused the issue with the 14-inch line, they would also take the 18-inch line if you bill it in the exact same
that's true.
location.
That's true. You want some
So
separation.
you lose your redundancy.
You lose everything. Yeah, if they put them in the same trench.
Let me ask you a question, Mike. The connections going off the 14-inch line today to apartments or houses, whatever is over there, if you go the 18-inch line, do you have to duplicate those connections into the apartments or whatever you have?
Yeah, if you get rid of the 14 and just go with the 18, all those connections will have to be made again.
Yeah.
No, in his first proposal, though, he had parallel.
If he
18.
does parallel, we won't have to make those
Correct.
connections again.
Okay, so you would save money by not doing the connections.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
300,000 approximately.
And if the 14 ever breaks down, then you just put a connection in.
Correct. You just handle it at that point.
Yeah.
And, you know, if we're trying to get from point A to point B, the less connections are better. So, yes.
Just a question. It looked like your alignments were within the right-of-way of 114. Is there room outside the right-of-way, and would the cost of easement acquisition be less than directional drilling?
Let me go back to that typical section. And I'm glad you brought that up. Right here, that dash line, if you can see that dash line, it's kind of faint right there. That's the right-of-way. We'd be outside of TxDOT right-of-way. Actually, that is the town of Westlake to that line right there. So we would incur, which is not a problem. We could work with both municipalities. We're trying to stay in one municipality unless we go B1 and get into Westlake.
But if that alignment then is outside right-of-way, we would need to require easements?
No, there is actually an existing mutual access easement that's actually power line. The overhang hangs in it, the underground electric, the sound wall. Sound wall is actually in an easement. It was already there. So we would be in an existing easement majority of the way. So that's why this is kind of an attractive one, because if we can squeeze it in there, there is easement language that allows us to build this line. It's kind of like a
Is the
blanket
cost of
easement.
directional drilling less than acquiring new easements?
There's time. It depends. I mean, it could be $1 per square foot. It could be, I mean, if it goes to core, of course, it'd be whatever the core assigns. But it is quite a bit more expensive to go directional drilling. So yeah, easements could potentially be cheaper, but there's time, there's court, there's all sorts of other factors. That'd be tough to answer that.
In that
So-
drawing, the proposed 18-inch pipe is how far away from the sound wall, and is that enough space to fix it if it breaks without
In-
tearing the wall up?
And this one, just to clarify, this would be a 16-inch. So if we go this route, according to the model, it's 16, but it would be, do you remember, I think it's 10 feet, 9 feet? That's what we had. We had a different section with dimensions, but I think it was about 10 feet away. And if I remember correctly, the sound wall's on piers, so it's not like it's got a big wide spread footing we would hit. So, and we've got the plans, and we've been in coordination with TxDOT on this.
Just wanted to make sure we could repair it without having to replace the wall.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, we don't want to repair two things, but But yes, if we choose this route, it is congested, but we think we can make it happen either by directional drilling. And again, if these actual utilities are a little bit looser than we think, then we can go ahead and open cut and really save a lot of money. So, that's the big issue with B. And again, back to B1, the dash line would be what B1 would essentially be. It would go across, it would be on the Westlake side. You go through Circle T Ranch, you'd go through Entrada. And we did meet with the town of Westlake to kind of present them with, just a little bit, make them aware of what's going on, and they didn't have any comments. They just reinforced how many utilities are over there, and I'll show you, I think it's on the next slide here. Yeah. So if the north side has a handful, this season has more utilities. So, okay, again, you're facing east. You're on the east side. This is the frontage road for 114. You're on the Westlake side. You're on the south side of 114. There are 75 feet, about to be 90 feet of easement. That's outside the TxDOT right away. So you can, stepping from the curb to the south, you've got fiber, gas, TRA line. You've got existing telephone. Then you've got a 30-inch South Lake water line, which was put in not too long ago.
Oh.
Yeah, it's relatively new. And then you do have one of the MUD's own easements. That's the relocated 12-inch line right here. It was relocated, as y'all well know, for Entrada, so it's right there. So we were, thinking about, we could possibly squeeze it in that same 15-foot easement, but that's still getting pretty tight. Depends exactly where that is. We thought about it getting additional easement outside of the Turf Club MUD, but when I met with Westlake last week, they said, by the way, Tri-County wants, and that's what this last one is, Tri-County is seeking a 15-foot easement, so that's a future underground electric that will essentially serve Entrada. So this side is just, even though it looks like greenfield out there, there's a lot of utilities, and that's problematic. On top of that, for alignment C, you do have several property owners, like I think at this point right here, the small tract, the old alignment. Actually, I'm sorry, it's right here. The old alignment of precinct line, they relocated over here. Westlake said there are property owners that would be rather difficult. You would end up in court. There's Hillwood that you would have to get easements from. So very, very difficult on this side, especially the easement aspect of it that y'all were talking about. I think it would be far more than $5 a square foot, and there would be condemnations and whatnot. So let me go back to B1. So that was an alternative we looked at. Because again, we would come up, this portion would be built by the developer, and at this point we'd come across 114, stay on this side, and we'd actually have to do another bore. So again, we just looked at that. Again, we're looking at all angles we could to avoid utilities, and I think it actually got, again, according to this right here, it's almost worse with the amount of utilities. Because this Trophy Club MUD 15-foot easement, that's not the entire way. That's just where the Entrada development is. So that's west of, I guess it's 1938. I always think of it as precinct, but east of 1938. So that's the only place. Once we go west of 1938, we have to get our own easement. And that's quite a bit of easements and a lot of unknowns. And so alignment C, this would actually do a direct connect to the Fort Worth line that comes to the town. Again, we're just trying to think outside the box, or I can't remember Carmen or whoever came up with this, but okay, let's do a direct connect to the 21-inch. This is the main feed to the actual MUD district of the town. You would have to have an additional meter. Meters are extremely expensive for especially that size meter. You would actually have to have a pump. That's what this pink P is right there. You have to pump this water up to the tank. We just don't have enough pressure in this existing line. And you would need a certain size storage tank, because you can't just pump directly the line. You'd have to go into that storage tank and then pump it out of that ground storage tank. So there's a lot of factors with alignment C that are problematic. But again, we were looking at every different possible way. Again, there's that typical section right there. Coordination-wise, and I'll go into a little more detail of the each option. We're not done with the options, the alternative. Of course, we'd coordinate with TxDOT. There would be a possible nationwide permit 12, particularly for alignment B along the north side of 114, because we cross at least 2 bodies of water that are creeks. We think it can be under the minimum impacts for those, but we would explore the idea if we need a nationwide permit. I don't think we would, but we have to look at that. We have been coordinating with the Trophy Club. We met with Ed Helton a number of weeks ago, met with Westlake last week. The Trophy Club developer, we continue to work with those guys, depending on the alignment we pick. And then, of course, property owners. So that would be some future coordination to get the easements. So here's the cost estimates. These are in order by A, B, and C, and they've got B1. So the Indian Creek route, that first we talked about, is $5 million. The 114 route is $5.3 million. But again, I think we can reduce that. The biggest costs, as Mr. Rose had pointed out, would be the directional drilling. So I think we can reduce that, and maybe be within tolerance of the Indian Creek drive. So we get this number closer to the Indian Creek cost. And yes, sir.
I do have one question. On that 114, the B option that goes through what we call PD 30,
Yes.
are those costs that transverse that property, to cross that property in that estimate?
No, we excluded that, and
Okay.
it's because of the directional drilling that drove it up. Because really, it's a cost savings because there's several hundred feet that get
Yes,
paid
okay,
for
I just
them.
wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I have a
Yes.
question. Given some of the issues with that, what's the plan if he doesn't do that piece?
If the developer,
Correct.
I believe there's a developer's agreement where they're committed to putting in that. Now, of course, they could back out of the entire, development. But
Well,
yeah, if it goes through, they have to build it. But you're saying if they don't build the
Well,
development.
I think it's a matter of timing.
It
So
is.
someone can say, I have every intention of doing it. I'm just not gonna do it right now.
Right.
You want it done in June. I'm
Right.
planning on doing it in June of next year.
Right.
So how would we deal with if the timing does not match up? Where if we need it done sooner, if we need it completed sooner than he is willing to do it?
Right. One of the things we had talked about is we'd go ahead and build it, and there'd be that gap, and we just have to fill in the gap at the end. There would be some connectivity. It would look like this B interim for a while. You would have everything in place until that's built. You would go from 5% tank full on max demand to 35 in the interim. So you'd be in this interim connection. That's why another reason we looked at that in case that developer does not come through. That would be what we look at. So yeah, that's definitely a factor. So before we
A
move,
construction phasing alternative.
right.
On that B, I guess it'd be the B interim, on 114,
Right.
you still have to come back to the Indian Creek line and connect up, don't you?
There are 2 connections, yes.
Right.
There are 2 connections, just to create that parallel line, according to the model. And so the interim, so you compare these two, it's about, round numbers, about $1.1 million less. So that's that segment we left out, if we indeed do the interim option. So, again, it's a budgeting thing. If we did B, we could put that section or any section as an ad bid. Again, if we're worried about money, if costs escalate, construction escalate, we can always do an ad bid for that later. Now, at the end of the day, it's better, obviously, to put the whole line in because circling back takes years and costs go up. It's never cheaper to phase something in like that. So, but we looked at it nevertheless.
How much do you gain by utilizing the current 14-inch line going down Indian Creek and where you have to go to at 16 or 18 or whatever? If you just connect to 18 or 16 or
Oh,
whatever.
I see what you're saying.
In other words, don't do Indian Creek,
right.
utilize that one.
It would go to 18. If we didn't make the connections,
Right.
I think it would
And
go to
then
18.
How much do we gain as far as keeping the tanks, full or half full or whatever? Has anyone done a study on that? Like, okay,
I don't think he's run that model for that particular. So you're talking about going a whole route with 18 and not making the connections to the 14. With
use the
alignment B.
14, connect the 18s on either side or whatever side you're gonna do. So where it connects up, I guess, by Hogan's Glen,
Right.
is that where it goes to 14?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Okay, because from what I understand, we already have a loop going down through Hogan's Glen to Meadowbrook or something. But connect 18 there, and then where you come across the apartments that are there, that go around to the back entry, that's where you would start another 18. So you'd use the 14. You're just going from 4-inch line difference.
So basically, this scenario here,
Yeah.
you do a connection to here, up to Hogan's.
That would be 18 or 16.
It'd
or
be
whatever.
16 or 18, and then you'd have this 14, and then you would,
Go 18 from there.
and then maybe go 18 from here.
Yeah.
Now, this route, we didn't run that, he didn't run that scenario. Again, it went from 5 to 35 instead of 5% to 65. So, it made an impact, but not as significant as we'd like. The problem is this 14-inch is just too small. So, we could have CPY run that
Yeah,
scenario.
just to see what the flow is, the difference between, obviously, if you put a parallel 18 or 16 or
Sure.
14, you're gonna have more, but do we need that much more?
Right.
Because it's only a 500,000 gallon tank.
Right.
You can only put so much in there, but does that take us above the caution level,
Right.
and suffice? Because that tank is aging too. We might
Right.
have to replace that tank and go with a larger tank sometime.
That's really a 400,000 gallon tank.
It is a
Yeah.
400,000.
You're right.
It is a 400. The other one's 500, the
Other one's
Western
fine,
tank. But again, that's the big difference. When we talk to CP&Y, the big difference is, of course, it's this 14-inch staying in place. We're not putting a parallel line, but the parallel makes a huge difference, and that's
Yeah,
why.
but do we need that? I understand, I don't wanna take it out like,
Sure,
and
sure.
replace it. I'm not in favor of that, because as Mike mentioned, you shut down, customers.
Right.
With no water.
Right.
And that's not a good thing. I don't like going down 114 either, because you still have to go back up and connect up to the 14 at two places either, at different locations. And then you have the drilling and stuff that we could get away from.
Right.
So
Right.
if anything, if we could utilize that 14 and just put 218 connects on the other side and still get us above the, level we need to, that'd be cheaper, a lot cheaper.
Right. Yeah, this option as it stands right now is just above 4 million, something like that. So, I think you had a question.
I guess, and it's probably not fair to you, it's something that you're probably gonna say, I need to go back to CPNY.
Sure.
If over this summer, that tank only went down to 50%, but we're estimating it's gonna go down to 5% at max build-out, but we're acknowledging that we're pretty much at max build-out. I'm questioning that delta, why we could go from here to here and get the 50%, but when we go from here to here, there's an additional 45% reduction.
Sure.
That math doesn't seem to add up to me.
Yeah, and I don't think the model that they use, even when they did this back in 2016, I don't think they had older information. Maybe it went back even to 14. I don't think it considered the, what's that?
10.
Yeah, 2010. I don't think it considered the build out, even close to it. So to accurately depict that, they would have to add to the model to create what it is today. And they haven't done that. I think that's the answer to that question. But I would have to, like you said, I'd have to get back with CPY.
There's still development, commercial development left in that area. There's one ongoing right now, and I don't know what kind of draw they're gonna do, but
Right.
you need to consider that. And then there's an open plat there that they could put another commercial.
Right. Yeah, we have with the PD 30 area, that's for sure. It's
That's-
gonna be a big demand there.
Let me ask Mike, the 65% objective on the east tank, is that in the ballpark with what happens in the west tank?
I can actually fill that west tank up and it shuts off. So I basically have 500,000 gallons of water there that I can't use because I'm pumping everything now to the east
So would you
tank.
consider that a 100% situation on the west tank?
In the summertime, I can fill it up to 100%, no problem. It's the east side that I can't.
So 65 looks like the best we're shooting for.
I think if we build this line right here, I think by the time my pumps kick on my filling tanks, that will be a lot more even.
Yeah, but it's,
I just want to add, you mentioned that, a lot of times if you defer a phase of a project, it isn't cheaper. Well, that's true. Costs tend to go up, but there's also the time value of money. Right now, it's pretty inexpensive to borrow money, so there's that piece of it.
yes.
The other piece that Mike has mentioned to me, and it's not something we've really dwelt on, are the design parameters around maximum velocities in the 14-inch line. I suspect we're already close or perhaps exceeding that, and I don't suspect at this point you've taken a look at that, but if you're trying to push a lot of water over to that east tank and you're running it through a very small line, you're going to have much higher velocities
And pressure.
and reduced pressure as a result. So increased head losses.
Yeah, that might be problematic for the 14, which is not exactly, that's a 40-year-old line. So the parallel option helps in the fact that you've got a brand-new line, like Mike had mentioned before, all the way from one end to the other. And it helps for creating a backup and redundancy as well, so.
The other question I would have is the places where there's shown from alternate B to interconnects to the 14-inch line, would you conceive of those including isolation valves? One thing that I see in that 14-inch line is we don't have a lot of ways to isolate sections of that line.
That's correct.
The valves were not put in originally.
Right, they're very sparse.
So if there's a failure, then a lot of people are out, whereas if you have some more isolation valves and an alternate line, really, you can work around, you can put far fewer people out of business
Right.
trying to repair a leak than we would have today.
Right. You're right. We would put more frequent valves on the line that per today's standard to opposed to the one. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Looking at option B, had the two interconnects that come back to Indian Creek. If you put the line in Indian Creek, will you still do the interconnects?
So to clarify, this option right here, alignment B?
Yeah, you have two interconnects that come back to the Indian Creek
Yes.
line. If you put the line down, the parallel line down Indian Creek, will you still do some interconnects to the existing line?
Alternate A?
Oh, you say, okay, A.
Oh, yeah, A.
Okay, let me go back to A. Yeah, and so there's two different scenarios for A. We just showed one. So let me go back to here. So there's a couple different, if the 14 remains in place, we just leave that AC line in place, this line can be reduced to about a 16 to a 14, somewhere in that range. And then you would not need to do the interconnects, if that's your question. So.
Well, what I'm saying is, you've got the lines that close together, would you do the interconnects? I mean, if you go outside, you ran a couple of interconnects back, there must have been some reason for doing that, or CP&Y did, let me put it that way.
Okay.
So I'm just asking if you run the parallel line down Indian Creek, are you gonna do interconnects
No.
to the, no
No.
interconnects, okay?
No,
But-
they're not necessary.
Going back,
Okay.
running the parallel line, we talked about going like 18 down to 16 or.
Maybe even
some
14.
Mentioned even 14. But why would you do that if the line in the ground is already, 40 years old or something? How old is that?
Exactly, and that's why we show worst.
And so, I mean, you
18.
really want to put a line in there that you're gonna rely on if that 40 deteriorates and goes bad. And then you
It could
just
go bad,
abandon
and then that's all you're left with.
it. Yeah, because if you put a 14 or 16 parallel, you're back in the same boat again. You have to increase the line.
Right, so that's why we're showing the 18 here, even though the modeling shows it could be reduced to 14.
So the 18 would be self-sufficient if
Right. Even if the
went
14
down.
goes down,
Yeah, if you want to look at the future ability at some point out there to revert to that line by itself, the new parallel line by itself, you'd be putting in the 18-inch line.
and we did, I didn't mention this, I'm glad y'all brought this one back. The one half of this side of the road, so the half, about 12 feet, it's 25 foot wide, this road. So we need about 12 and a half feet of that road, this one lane, there's a construction joint, gone. We'd demo that, do our line, we would keep this in place. When we had the town of Turf Club come over, representatives, we proposed, this is a 30, 40-year-old road. Why would you not just help cost share, if they've got the funds available, the other half of this road, so we get this whole side, they get a brand-new road, they pay for that half, that reduces the cost per square yard of pavement. So we propose that, it just depends if they have the money available at that time, so. There was no yes, no, they had to go, obviously had to go back and think about that, but that was something, and if they even want to put the funds to do both sides of the road, that, of course, they'd be responsible for that entire north side. Again, that would reduce, the bigger the project, the lower these unit prices get, so things to consider with this option. Back here, and so again, there's kind of a summary of the cost. The interim is $1.1 million less. The B1 alternative, even though that does show less expensive, it's just not very feasible in terms of the easements and the property owners we would have to get the easements from. I just don't think that would happen, especially when you get to Entrada. There's just not enough room there. We're the last people at the table there. C is by far the most expensive because of the pump, the storage tank, and the parallel line. That's the direct connect to the
Easements are
Twin Watch.
questioned.
And the easements, yeah, the easements would be.
I think C is off the
I think C
chart.
is off the table. I think B1, even though that, again, that shows less expensive, well, I'll tell you what, let me go back here. So here, we do pros and cons. Speaking of pros, here's the pros and cons of A. So we're in Indian Creek. It's gonna be accessible. There's minimal utility conflicts, especially if we go back in and we don't do the other interconnects, and that's a better way to do it. No permitting required. In other words, we don't have to get a 404 permit or a nationwide, no core permits, no bodies of water that we have to cross. Minimal easement because we're in an existing right-of-way. And this one does keep the tank, the eastern storage tank, at 65%. So those are the pros. The cons are there will be an impact to the residents. However, we can keep two-way traffic. I mean, it's going to be, there will be a difference because there are driveways or roads, side roads that connect. That we'll have to provide access, or I say we, the
There's no
contractor, at all times.
There's no driveways involved.
Well, not side roads. There's cul-de-sacs is what I meant to say. But we'll have to keep those, at least half of those open, access to the residents. It will be, you'll be in people's side yards, front yards. You'll be in there, impacting the residents right there. So that is a definite con to consider. There could be a disruption to the water surface because there's a lot of interconnects. Contractors, again, aren't perfect. They might hit a lateral too. That's what they're talking about there. It ranks third in the project cost. So there could be some economies of scale, but I think if we go to a smaller line, but as we discussed, I think the 18 would be the prudent size to put in there, assuming the 14 goes away at some point, which the water lines don't get better with age. They're not like wine. So alignment B, again, along 114. Pros, it is mostly accessible. The areas that we put we'll put in a casing pipe. They'll have to come back on each side and pull from each side, but you won't be able to access from the top. We'll have to go to pits. It will have the least amount of impact to residents and customers for the mud. It will require some permitting, but I think we can get around any sort of major core permitting, which really slows things down 6 to 12 months. But I don't think we have to do that. We will have some easements, but primarily we're in an existing easement along the power lines. We do utilize that town center addition water line. And I'll back up. We could do alignment A and just tell that they would still participate the line through that line. They would just have to bring it up to Indian Creek. So we wouldn't lose that commitment, I don't believe, but they would have to reroute the planned line through PD 30 if they went to A. But as of now, they're designing for this B, so they dump it right there by 114. This does hit 67%. I think that's one of the higher percent full for that tank. So we can basically keep the tank full. This does have the highest risk for utility conflicts. Saw in that typical section, it's just littered with utilities. And then this ranks second on the cost at 5.3. The interim, same thing as B, but with interim, you would need to do the future improvements. Money is cheap to borrow at this time, like Carmen had mentioned, so it'd be good right now to put it in the entire route. It only achieves 35% opposed to 65, 67%. So it doesn't fulfill the goal, and you have to fully circle back and put that in if we do this interim. But if this is the maximum budget we can have, then this would be the route to go based on budget. The alternative, again, where we come across, it is accessible, it is low impact. You're basically following the B route, except you go on the south side of 114.
It does show
portion of it.
north on your alternative here, so it's really south.
Yeah, it is just a deviation of the State Highway 114 north, but yeah, it does go south, majority of it, and then we do go back on the north side. It is the lowest cost, but again, we'll have to permit the TxDOT crossing. That's quite a process as well. We'd have to do a casing pipe and bore underneath the 114. All the easements, that right there is the Achilles heel, I think, on this option and for C. That's an unknown, that could take years depending on the
So the easement,
factors.
the cost is $5, you said, right? And you already confirmed that it's probably gonna be a lot more than that.
Yeah, and it would be, and we still put in $5 for this cost estimate, but I didn't factor in, it's possible to factor in time. I think time would just be outrageous, and that with the factors of, basically you have Entrada, which is Centurion American, you have several individual property owners, and Hillwood. With those three entities just alone, I think you're gonna be tied up for quite some time just obtaining easements. So, and there is quite a few utilities over there, as that typical section showed. And C, I don't have to go into this detail, it's great, gets them 67% full, but there's just no way. It's just, there's too many conflicts. And the fact that we have to put in a new tank, a meter, and a pump station, that just too cost prohibitive. So that all boils down to, our recommendation as of today would be the B, which is along the 114 alignment. For these reasons, again, we're not gonna have to tear up any roads like we would in Indian Creek for option A. We utilize the town center, additional water line that they've already committed to. And like I mentioned before, this third bullet point is important. Directional drilling could be reduced. We could just, until we know exactly those utilities, we could maybe knock out half of it. I just don't know until we get those existing utilities located. Everything stays within the town of Trophy Club. We basically, we stay out of TxDOT right away, so it's in Trophy Club only and not Westlake or TxDOT. Minimal pavement, because any pavement we encounter will go underneath with a bore. No meters, tanks, or pumps. Minimal easements, we'll need some easements on the far eastern side potentially. And then permitting should not be an issue. So that's kind of why we focused on B as the preferred alignment. A second place would be A, but again, that road just makes that a very difficult pill to swallow on that. So I leave it on this because this kind of shows the entire route with the aerial image if there's any other.
On the east side, I thought we had all the easements in place. Do we not?
On where?
He was saying that there has to be easement acquisition on the far east.
Well, if we go behind the commercial, that would be additional easement. If we stay along 114, I think we've got the easement. That's why I said that there might be.
There were
might
some
be.
easements for the interconnections also, were there not?
Oh, the interconnections, yeah.
Yeah,
they're
that's
across.
correct.
Yeah.
There's an existing sewer easement, but I'm not sure if we can, we have to be so far off a sewer line. We might be able to utilize them, but the interconnects require easements. I
Okay.
think, too.
So it looks like you're down to A and B, and you recommend B, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes.
I would like to talk about the cost estimate on B. In that cost estimate, there are several different diameters of lines. When CP&Y were here, they were talking about 16-inch line out there. If we went out along 114, they said 16-inch line. This has got an 18-inch line, open cut, 23, almost 2,400 linear feet. It's also got, other than open cut, 130. We've got 18-inch directional drill. Is there a reason that we've stuck or moved to the 18-inch line out along 114?
This, I've got this up on the screen. Here's the alignment B you're talking about. This
Yes.
does essentially reflect what is in the CP report. Once you get right here by the hotel and the hospital right here, it does go to from a 16 to 18. So there's that 18-inch quantity you see in the detailed cost estimate. So that last leg is an 18. We included a bore right here at Trophy Wood Drive. Obviously, there's a 14 and a 12 for the interconnects back up to Indian Creek, and then there's 16 the rest of the way. So that's the different. That's why there's so many different varieties of sizes. But that basically follows the report.
But the lengthy one there is 18, the longest section. And I think that may not have been reflected in the CP&Y study, but it was reflected in the conversations that line parallel to 114 was going to be a 16-incher.
Right, and it should be. I'd have to check.
And we've got,
That's item 13 is the directional drill, because we're assuming most of what we're gonna have to go along 114 will be directional drill. So if
Okay.
you go down to items 13 and 14,
I've got
those are
8,
those are the 16 and 18 directional drill.
Yeah,
And
up
so
at
that's
that-
essentially that entire stretch along 114.
but what about item 8? Where are we at there? I've got 23,
8 is what Brian just mentioned, is from that point on.
that's 18
They'll be
inch.
open cut, correct.
Okay, but my question is, why are we doing 18 inch out there?
That's what's required on that part, because that just line will be replaced and will not be parallel.
Oh, so this.
Say
this
that
may be
again, please.
actually 18. That might be 18.
No, it'll be 16 to, 18 will start there,
Okay.
and that's always been 18.
Okay.
Okay,
And I don't believe there's a huge cost difference between the 16 and 18. I think it's pretty tight. But I think what he's talking
the only reason I bring it up is
Right.
because I specifically remember the engineer, CP&Y engineer, saying there's no reason, because the board was leaning at that time, I was out in the cheap seats watching, the board was leaning to an 18 inch out there. And the engineer said, you don't need it, you got 16 is gonna be fine. The only reason you have an 18 going down Indian Creek is they were gonna tie all the houses and everything to it as they went along. But if that line stays in place, 16 in my mind would be fine. I mean, unless CP&Y wants to change their mind, 16 would be fine out there, because I'm not going to go out and tie those homes and those crossing lines what we're close to on Indian Creek. I'm not going to go out there and tie on.
Right. And what's also deceiving is the big quantity right here across PD 30, that's part of the 16 not in there. So if 16 is reduced in terms of the length. That's why it's not as long as you would think it would be.
Well,
So-
I could imagine that perhaps the developer in PD 30 may want to put an 18 inch line. I mean, if he wants to do that, then I don't have a problem with it personally.
Right.
But based on what I had heard before, that line out there was 16.
So correct, so it'll be 16 from here all the way to here.
Yes.
That piece is parallel to the existing line.
Yes.
From this point east, the existing line will be replaced, and that's why this has to be 18 from here to here. So this is the only piece that's 18.
Okay.
All of this that's parallel to Indian Creek is 16.
So and you go from 16 to 18 because,
I think it's,
There will no longer be an existing line from here to
The
here.
12,
replaced.
it replaces the 12, so that's why
Okay.
it bumps up to 18.
you're
It's
also
just that-
are you also picking up additional flow possibly off of Trophy Club when you do the tie-in? Off Indian Creek when you do the tie-in?
Yeah, that's the reason for the connection right there, that 14 inch that goes behind the hospital.
Right.
Yeah.
So you could pick up, that's the reason, you could have 16 coming down 114. You go to the junction point where you're going to have a 14 coming in off of Indian Creek.
Right,
Correct.
And so then you would have the reason to have the 18 inch line on over to the tank.
right.
Got it.
Carry it, yep.
I just didn't know that that was what was reflected in the estimates here.
Mr. President, the staff supports the recommendation of the engineer and would hope that the board would support that as well and direct the engineer to move on to the design phase, assuming alternate B as that. There are a couple other milestones in the project where refined cost estimates come back for board consideration.
Okay, so the staff is recommending alignment B, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay. And
Well,
then you're
we're
gonna,
supporting the engineer's recommendation.
right.
right, and then you're gonna go back and see if you can save any on the drilling, correct?
Yeah, so with a survey, we're gonna do this in steps. We're trying to do this in baby steps. We're gonna do a survey, and then we're gonna go back and do SU, a subsurface utility, locate these, and then we'll have a lot better idea. We come back with with the updated cost estimate. The hope is to reduce the amount of directional drilling. And then, of course, there's the coordination with PD 30 to see the timing with that portion where the line would be put in.
Is alignment B running from PD 30 down to the hotels? That's currently 16, planned to be a 16. Is that entire distance, did you calculate costs on 100% directional drilling?
There is some open costs. Yeah, there is some open cut, but not much. It's once you get by between that wall, the transmission lines and all the gas and everything, that's where it gets really tight, and we just assume directional for a majority of that. And then when you cross roads, it's a bore. You go from a directional drill to a bore.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I do have one other question. It's in all of the estimates. What is the 30-inch OD 1/2 thick, that 1/2 inch thick steel casing pipe? Where does that,
That would be for an 18-inch.
That's for the bores.
For the bores, yeah, for the bore.
They'll be under driveways and road crossings.
Okay.
So
okay, that's all I needed.
entrance
Thank
to
you.
the,
Yeah.
Thank
across
you.
the
I
the
just couldn't-
hospital, the.
Right, let's say we go across
the
any
apartments.
pavement.
Yeah.
Right,
Just-
apartments, the driveways.
I just couldn't
But
figure
that's
the
gonna be-
30-inch thing out.
Yeah.
Right.
The lines under them are gonna be 16.
Right.
All the way down, and then
Right.
18, and then you'll do a bore, is it, on the trophy wood would be an 18, right?
That's correct,
Okay, got it.
with a
Okay.
casing pipe.
You heard the recommendation of the engineer and also of the staff. I'll entertain a motion. Anyone?
Help me, what do you need for the motion to
Which,
authorize?
which one do you want to go with? The staff and the engineer are both recommending alignment B, as in boy.
And I would add that we set up the contract such that this is a milestone point. They were to bring back updated cost estimates at about somewhere between a 5 and 10% design level. And then, when we focus in on actually doing the design, we only want to design 1, not 5. So, at this point, we would direct them to move into the design phase on alignment B. And then there's some other milestones where they bring back some updated cost estimates for us to review as we move forward.
So we're making a motion on which alignment and for the engineer to go forward on design and cost estimates on alignment B, correct?
Based on everything I've heard, I'd make a motion that we authorize ourselves to proceed with the next steps associated with alignment B.
Okay. I have a motion by Director Thomas. Do I have a second? I'll second it. Okay, any further discussion? I see none. All in favor, show of hands. I got Director Rose, or Secretary Treasurer Rose, Director Hayes, Director Thomas, myself. Okay, all opposed? I got Director Wilson opposed. It passes. Okay, do you have your marching orders?
Yes,
Okay, thank you very much.
thank you. Thank you, Brian. Thank you.
Brian and
you,
Leah,
Leah.
thank you very much for coming out tonight.
Yeah, appreciate it, thank you.
Stay warm on your way home.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Okay. Moving on, we're at number 5. Okay, consider and take appropriate action regarding future funding by District of Town of Trophy Club Fire Department personnel expenses. Director Thomas.
Well, I asked this to be put on the agenda so we could talk about it. Things change over time, and things have changed associated with the fire department, how we administer it, and how things are going, and I'll cover some of this in a few seconds. Last year, this board had voted 5-0 to, we all had agreed that it was time for the mud to get out of the fire department business, and we voted as a board to donate the fire department, the land, and the equipment, and the associated debt to the town. Regrettably, when the mayor placed it on the agenda, there was I think it's called a supermajority, is that the correct term? there was a supermajority vote that night to not allow it to be discussed. So we have no earthly idea what the town's position was on the possibly accepting it. There is a difference in cost, obviously, because when you do that, you lose the tax dollars that the MUD is able to tax Solana, Entrada, and Granada that the town could not tax. But again, we didn't have an opportunity to discuss it, although we had already taken action to donate it. Well, because of some of the things that changed, I brought the idea forward last May, and Director Wilson Director convinced me to back off on it because it was too late in the budget cycle, to carry the idea forward. What I was saying at the time is, it still applies today, and maybe even more so. Like I said, things change over time. 3 years ago, after, 4 years, 5 years of back and forth, we finally signed an ILA with the town that they took over full, total operational control of all fire services with an agreement to provide support to all of our customers, which included Granada, Entrada, and Solana. And that's worked just fine. It's worked well. But then we came along a year later, and we signed. This is after the passing of the people over to the town. Now they're 100% town employees, and we've all agreed to that. And part of that agreement was we would pay 50% of the cost because of the services they were going to provide across the street. Well, a year later, we entered into a whole brand new schism of behavior. Mutual aids have been around forever. And we've had mutual aid with our neighbors forever. But we signed an agreement with Roanoke and Westlake called Automatic Aid. We're going to send if a call goes out, we're going to dispatch regardless. Now, a little bit of an issue here. Westlake's call center comes through Keller, ours comes through Denton. So in order for the automatic aid to work like it should, Keller's got to pass that call back over to Denton. Denton's then got to put the call out, and then Wade will roll his trucks and vehicles just like they would roll over here. What that means is that we agreed 2 years ago we're going to provide fire support. Now I'm dealing just with fire. I'm not dealing with EMS at all. I'm trying to leave that out of the picture since the town owns that particular service. We're going to provide fire support to Granada, Entrada, and Solana, whether they pay a penny in tax for it or not. The truck's going to roll. It's just part of the agreement. So I got to really thinking about this when the election came up and we were looking at whether or not to have tax-based bonds for this line we've just talked about, or revenue-based bonds. And I think Director Rose had a very, very aggressive campaign on the Trophy Club Voice and was very vocal about not using tax-based dollars to pay for that because there was no benefit for water and sewer for the residents of Entrada and Granada, and yet we were going to try to pass a tax to do this. Well, we didn't have homes over there until a year ago. Now we've got 51 homes in our district that are sitting over there, and they get fire support from us, whether they pay a penny or tax or not. So in my mind, I'm real bothered by that. Now, what was kind of getting me was this part of the contract where the MUD pays 50% of the wages and benefits of the firemen. I quite honestly, you can't say to Granada and Entrada, I'm not going to tax you fire tax, but I'll tax Solana. We're not allowed to do that. But we can say it's time for the town to pay for the town's employees, and that it's probably not morally or ethically right any longer for us to put a tax on residents and homeowners in Westlake to pay for the salaries of town employees of Trophy Club. That's really been kind of bothering me. I realize the benefit. We have the ability to tax, the town does. It generates more revenue. I totally understand that. But I'm just personally, bothered by it. So I went and asked for some figures. And Wade, I really appreciate the data, the raw data you sent me, because climbing through it, I thought it was intriguing. Since 2013, now all I asked was the runs into Westlake. Didn't care about anything else other than that. And And in that data, I extrapolated out all the EMS runs, and all I did was look at the fire runs, just the fire runs themselves. From 2013 through 2017, in 5 years, we've made 10 fire runs into Westlake, all of Westlake. And what's amazing, out of that 10, only 2 of them were into the mud district, Solana and Entrada, Granada, only 2. So in 5 years, we've made 2 runs over there, but yet we're still taxing those people to pay for the salaries of the folks that are making those runs. There just seems to be some inequity there. So I went back and said, what are we faced with? And Stephen provided me with these figures, and Steve, if they're incorrect, please straighten me out. But within our budget, now that's the MUD's budget, if you count the salaries, benefits, retirement, certification pay, workman's comp, everything associated with the people, the chief and his staff, our budget this year is $853,091. And it represents 3.779 cents of our total 9-cent fire tax. So I'm just asking the question. I mean, it's a tough decision. I mean, I could bury my hand in the sand and walk away and never bring it up and probably vote to continue our tax rate the way it is. But I'm just wondering, how do we, matter of fact, Kevin even had a call from someone over there just this week, I think, questioning this. I didn't ask for that, didn't generate that. That came totally outside of my thoughts. But just asking the question, even though we have a contract with the town, there are things that will allow us to amend and change. We are well enough ahead of the curve this time around. Should this board be thinking about no longer paying 50% of the town's firemen?
Okay.
Go ahead.
I guess my position would be, to me, the analogy of the question we're asking is, let's say we didn't have the town do it. Let's say we had a external fire services, if one existed. And then we made a decision, since you guys are now managing this, you guys ought to pay for it. Well, they pay for it by getting the money from us. To me, it's kind of backwards logic. We asked them to manage, to take over operational control. They're still our assets, still belong to us. We're still responsible. To me, nothing changed with that agreement other than the fire chief sitting there every month when we have a meeting. They made it, all the fire chief now reports to the town manager, but nothing else changed. It was a paper change. It was an organizational change. It didn't change in the financial responsibility, nor did it change. It changed operational responsibility. So for me, it wouldn't make sense to say that now we no longer should do it because we asked someone else to manage it. That's my 2 cents.
I guess I'd respond to that by saying, like I said, things change. The automatic aid completely changes that. We're going to roll regardless.
Yeah. Director Rose or Secretary Treasurer Rose?
Slightly different take on what your conclusion is. Let me go there. I understand taxation, and I don't like taxing people when they're not provided a service. Okay, to address the 51 homes or whatever it is across the way over there. That said, there are other ways for us to fund that fire department other than through tax. Now, having general operations, the building we have to tax for because that's a bond. That bond has to go across all of the assets in the mud district. You don't get an option on that. The remainder of that, if you pull out the AWWA manual, go to section 4.8, there's an entire section on funding for fire. Different methods of determining how to do it. Taxation is one of them. And I'll just leave the rest of the conversation right there.
Was the other one standing on the corner with a boot?
You know, it's amazing they don't have that one in there, but it's like fire plugs and all, I mean, there are several different methods that they go to determine what is a fair way to pay for the fire service.
Do you have
So-
examples or anything, or?
No,
Okay.
no, I'm not going to try to digest and
Okay.
do a presentation on that.
Kevin, I'd like to say one more thing. I hope, because I have the fire chief here, I've got the town manager, got the mayor here, I've got two councilmen here. I am not at all trying to force expense on the town of Trophy Club. I'm just bothered in that the dynamics have changed over the past 3 years. And it's an ethics thing that I'm struggling with right now. I'm charging a tax over there to pay for town employees, and that's just eating at me.
Chief, do you have any words on this or comments? Or I'll open it to the mayor and council members too after he gets done.
Mr. President and directors, there are many options, like you say, for the funding of a fire department. You are exactly correct. The options that we have in place and the changes that you speak of, Director Thomas, I don't think those changes have been a recent change. We've been doing automatic aid and mutual aid since the inception of the fire department.
2 years.
So
Contract's 2 years old.
the contract itself may be 2 years old, but there was previous contacts
Well, mutual
prior
aid is
to.
done forever, but the automatic aid is a 2-year-old contract.
That's correct. But if automatic aid contract is only going to specific kinds of calls, right? So they get to choose what those calls are and what mutual aid is actually toned out for, or not mutual aid, but the automatic aid. So the idea that Westlake is getting nothing for something is basically what we're proposing here is not exactly accurate. So they are receiving the benefit of a lower ISO rating because of our equipment, because of our personnel, because of the automatic aid agreements that are in place that they would not normally have on their own. Going from a ISO 3 that we are, and I believe Westlake is an ISO 4, if I remember correctly. It could be higher, but I can't remember.
They used to be 2. They used to be like a 4.9 or something because they had, you know, agriculture. I don't know if that's gone away.
Right. I want to say that I know their lowest is a 4. And there is a significant difference in the tax rates, or not tax rates, but your insurance rates when you jump from a 3 to a 4. So they are receiving some benefits from us other than just an automatic aid response as you place in there. I would also caution us on how many times, and trying to qualify the need for fire service on the number of calls that we're making in a specific district. When you start doing that kind of thing, you actually look at the numbers that I sent, and sorry about that. We actually take the numbers that I sent. Every one of those calls were already scrubbed for EMS, where we were the primary user, or we were the primary EMS provider, right? You could very easily make an argument that it is a fire duty to go alongside with an EMS call. You could say it's a fire duty to be a blocker on a wreck on Highway 114. So what I did when I supplied you with those 58 calls from 2013 to 2017 is I had pre-scrubbed all the EMS calls where we were the primary caregivers. These were all instances where we went into Westlake for any fire, what I would consider a fire response, whether it be backing up EMS or whether it be working a car accident for them or going to a fire alarm or a water flow alarm, whatever it was. And like we said in the document that I sent you, there's several calls in there where we were dispatched and canceled en route. And there's really no way for us to go back and because the documentation was poor at the time, for me to go back and say, hey, that was a fire call or that wasn't a fire call. The fire service is an insurance policy. We hate to think of it that way, but the fire service is an insurance policy. And when we try to start qualifying the need for fire service to the number of calls that we have in a district, we have 1,050 as our average calls for this last year in Trophy Club alone. So you could really start narrowing down neighborhoods and saying that in Trophy Club, we only made 3 or 4 calls in this one neighborhood throughout the entire year of 2017. Do we not need to extend fire service to those areas? So I would just caution us and take a slow approach to this. Make sure that we have the abilities to pay for the fire service the way it is. If we were to lose Westlake tomorrow, the tax dollars is about $209,000. That is 10% of the overall fire budget, both town and MUD provided. It's almost 20% of the costs associated with what the MUD provides for the fire department. And if you were to take out personnel costs alone, that $200,000 above personnel costs, because we're not going to change personnel that are driving this fire department. We're below the standard of where we should be for personnel as we stand today. So to think about reducing that is ludicrous. So that is something that we should not entertain if at all possible. The thought of, okay, well, our personnel is going to be the same. What above personnel costs do we have to cut if we were to lose the $209,000? Above personnel costs for the MUD, you guys pay $242,000 towards services and fees. Is that pretty accurate? I think there's some change in there as well, but about $242,000. So take out $209,000. That leaves me $33,000 to run a fire department on. That's vehicle maintenance, fuel, building maintenance. That's mandatory training. There's, let's see, what else I wrote down here?
Is that
Safety
209?
equipment and PPE. All
At
of those things.
209, 100% of salaries or are 50%?
No, the $209,000 is the 100% of the fire tax you're receiving from Westlake at this time.
Okay, so that's Westlake's contribution.
That's Westlake's contribution out of our budget of 1.2 million approximately that you guys, or no, I'm sorry, 1.08 million. So basically, we're talking about running a fire department on a shoestring budget. We couldn't pay for the fuel and the vehicle maintenance and the building maintenance alone to take care of the assets that you own on just that $33,000 above personnel costs. So again, I think Carmen and myself and the town manager, we're working on a different idea of an agreement, if at all possible, with Westlake through an ILA to allow them to increase the amount of coverage that they're receiving from us if they so choose. But again, this goes back into their lap and is their decision to make, honestly. It's their ETJ. We have agreed to give them the services that they have provided through the MUD. And at this point in time, they've rejected that service except for the automatic aid and mutual aid. And the way we see it is that's a decision that they have to come to on their own.
First, thank you for coming up and talking on that, but I agree with you that we provide the service. It's their choice whether they take it or not. It's similar to me with a school district. I don't have any kids in Northwest, but I still pay their taxes. It helps with the valuation of my house, yes, and obviously the ISO, we help the Westlake district. I just looked it up on Westlake's webpage, it's still a 4.9. So, you know, on the areas not in our district. So it does help their ISO rating. We're a 3. As far as, and Jim alluded to a conversation I had with a resident. Yes, the resident did call me on that, and I went through the whole channels. Like, we provide that fire service, whether you take it or not, that's their prerogative. Now, we have it out there. They chose not to have us, you know, be the primary response team. But saying that, our equipment is there on mutual or automatic aid, whatever it be, and they don't have a ladder truck. Our first call on our ladder truck was, guess what, to Westlake. You know, a house was burning, and our ladder truck responded. They benefit from a Roanoke or, you know, us on, I guess, subsidizing their equipment. They have in their budget, their 17-18 budget, a fire truck allocated to purchase, but you know, as someone told me, is okay, where are they going to put it? They don't have a fire station to put the ladder truck in yet, so it'll probably be 19 or something before they get it. So I agree. You know, there's people fighting that they don't want to tax Westlake for the water and sewer, and now they're saying, okay, the fire's okay. You know, that's two different views. To me, it's always been, we offered to provide water and sewer and fire to our district. That's part of our responsibility, whether it be in Trophy Club or whether it be in Westlake. Our district crosses the boundaries. They chose, you know, through the council there to, you know, have it developed. We didn't have a CCN for water and sewer, so they can go elsewhere, which they did. They made it, and again, through, information, they mandated developer to use their water in their sewer. But our sewer and water services were there for them to use. And again, whether they use it or not, that's not our choice. We couldn't force it because we didn't have a CCN. So to me, this fire issue is the same thing, and I agree with what you said about the financing part. I mean, you can't take just the employee expense or benefits out of a fire service and say, okay, we're not going to pay that, or that's not going to be included. Well, who's going to operate the equipment and provide the fire service? And fire service is one of those things, like, you don't want to pay for it, but when your house is on fire, you go, where are these guys? So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I guess my other piece, to me, essentially, if we thought this was a great idea, then we have millions of dollars of assets, but yet we're not willing to pay for the people to maintain and to utilize those assets to perform the service in which we spent tax dollars to purchase. If we use the same logic, then we would also find a way to not have them pay for any water sewer taxes to cover that cost, which I don't think anybody is for. Personally, I don't think anything has changed as far as a citizen calling, making a suggestion, and that being a basis of us to take action. You can go out on Facebook in it every day, and there's a citizen calling for various members of the board to resign, and we don't act on that. So I don't think we make any action based on someone making a suggestion from the community. To me, I just don't think it makes a lot of sense to proceed in this fashion, because ultimately those employees, they're performing a job, they're doing a great job. Chief Wade's, his staff is doing a great job. We simply need to ensure that they get taken care of. This all comes down to the whole conversation of de-annex in Westlake. We've had that conversation, and we know what the answer is to that. That's just not possible. And so this is another way to try to get around that, and there is no way of getting around it.
Tony, before we go any further, do you want to comment on legalities? There is a way to do it, but it's, pretty much not going to happen as far as create a special district or something. Is that correct?
You can't de-annex.
Tony, pull you back down.
The district could not de-annex property while it has outstanding tax debt. But in terms of financing future improvements, you could go through a very complicated process of creating what's called a defined area, and only having the defined area pay taxes to fund those improvements and costs going forward. That would require a prior election to do so. But with, yeah.
Okay.
But that wouldn't impact the current, so
No.
you would still have it until all that debt is defeased.
Correct. Anyone else have any comments on this?
Yeah, one last thing. We've already voted before last year, and we're in agreement that the mud needs to get out of the fire business. I mean, we're a mud district, we're one of the 2 mud districts in the state of Texas that owns its own fire department. It needs to be a town service. The town needs to own it, needs to control it, needs to have total say-so over it. He's got no business coming to us asking for approval to fund half of a fireman, which we may say we're not going to do. He ought to have full say-so over the equipment, what charges are made to it, what improvements are made to it. He ought to take that to Tom and let it be a council decision. And so, again, I appreciate anything you and Carmen come up with, but my personal opinion is the time has arisen that the mud needs to be out of the fire business. Felt that way for over a year now.
I'm a little confused about this 50% salary being paid by the mud. I was under the impression the mud raises the entire cost to support the fire department.
The
100%, including 100% of the salaries.
No,
The
no,
fire
sir,
and
that's
the
not correct.
No,
The
the
salary and associated costs of salaries are split with the town.
Because that one person is fire and
Both
EMS,
EMS, right.
so they're not 2 separate
Okay,
parties.
it's the fire EMS.
That was never the
but-
logic.
Okay,
They were
wait.
joint employees, and we agreed to do it as a joint employee. We have never said, you do 50 because it's EMS, and we'll do 50 because it's fire.
I would say this about the ability for us to demand that you pick up 100% of the salaries. Because now that I understand the 50-50, it's EMS versus fire. That's where the 50-50 comes from. The contract that we have with Westlake, back in 83 or 84, says that every service that the MUD provides in Trophy Club, they must provide it in Westlake. It doesn't mention fire, it just says every service we provide here, we have to provide it over there. So contractually, we have to provide fire over there because we provide it here. We own the thing. We delegated the management to you, but we still own it.
That's correct.
And we still raise all the tax money that the MUD contributes to the fire department. So contractually, we're obligated to provide fire. Now, the truth of the matter is that years ago, the Westlake fire manager sitting right back in that corner said, I would like for you to let me provide fire service to Westlake
As a first responder.
as the first responder. We said, it doesn't relieve us of any fire responsibility over there. If you want to do that on your own, we can't stop you from doing that. But we still have the ultimate responsibility for fire in the Solana portion of Westlake. Have had for 30, 40 years. So I don't think it's possible for us to say, well, yeah, we don't think it's fair to one of these 51 homeowners to have to pay MUD tax, including the fire piece of the MUD tax. Well, then you should take that up with your Westlake people. They're the ones that created your fire department. We're still responsible for providing fire over there. If they want to be first responder, we said, hell, we don't care. Go ahead and be first responder. But it doesn't relieve us of any responsibility. We have that ultimate responsibility, and we've had it for 40 years. So I don't think it's the old 50-50, which is EMS versus fire. I didn't quite pick up on what you were talking about, but the 50% that we raise is under contract. We have a contract with Westlake. Now, if they want to build their own fire department and go answer fire calls, help yourself. But we still have the responsibility.
Just two things, and boy, I'm gonna be careful, because I'm not trying to force this down anybody's throat. That contract expires this year, 2018. And secondly, our attorneys have told us years ago that it's no longer worth the paper it's written on. But automatic aid is the thing that changed all of this. And the mutual aid you've been doing forever, Wade, but automatic aid says, if they don't pay a penny, you're gonna roll. And so I just struggle. You know, and I realize we can't, they're in our district, and the MUD can't say we're not gonna tax them, but we're gonna tax everybody else. I understand, it's really difficult. Bill, if you've got something that you can dig up and come back with of different ways to fund it, I would certainly be willing to hear it.
Oh, it's in the AWWA manual. All I gotta do is pull it.
Bring it back. You've done the research on it, bring it back.
Okay. There's not going to be any motion, is that what I understand, Director? Okay, so this is just a discussion only.
Further questions for me while I'm
No,
here?
appreciate it. Does anyone else? Mayor, do you have anything? Tom, do you have anything? Do you want, okay, any council members have anything? Okay. We're gonna move on then if there's no further discussion. Number 6, consider and take appropriate action to approve matters related to May 5th, 2018 general election. A order number 2018-0116, A as an apple, calling the May 5th, 2018 general election. B, notice of appointment of agent. C, authorize general manager to sign and execute all necessary documents relating to the election. D, other necessary actions as may be required for the May 5th, 2018 general election.
Mr.
Okay.
President, can I make just a couple of notes before you proceed?
Okay.
These were notes that Lori prepared for me. I wanted to let everyone know that the election page on our website has been updated today, and the candidate packets for anyone wishing to sit on our board are available at the front desk. Tomorrow, January 17th, 2018, is the first day to file for a place on our board, and Friday, February 16th, 2018, is the last day to file. Just as a reminder, the last day to register to vote in the May 5th election is April 5th, 2018. Thank you.
Okay, do we need to take action on order number 2018, number A?
I will
That's
make a
just-
notion there, but I want to ask Carmen a question. I responded, I don't know if the rest of the board responded, that I would like to have that election here in the mud premises.
Yes, let me be clear about that. You did. The primaries are to be held here, I'm going to forget the date,
March 6th.
March 6th. So the plan currently is that the Republican primary will be held here in our boardroom, and that the Democratic primary will be held in Wade's firehouse with parking here, and, we'll have all the staff park out back. We've made sure that that day is not going to be a cutoff day for us, because that, does create some traffic issues in the lobby when people are coming in and out to vote. We, often have during that time of the month, folks coming in to pay a bill and avoid a cutoff. So the two types of transactions, one is voting, one is stepping up to the desk and talking about a personal financial matter, are not necessarily congruous. But we think that we can manage that. So not having it on a cutoff day is important. I guess the last time we had one here, we did it on a cutoff day. So those are set. I've sent back the paperwork and working with Wade to get that in place for the March 6th election. We have not been asked about using our facilities here or the fire station facilities, for that matter, any district facility for the May 5th election by Denton County's election judge. Nobody's requested that. I know there's some people who are interested in it, but that request has to come from the Denton County election judge.
Well, what we're talking about now is the primary.
No, what we're talking about is our board election on the 5th of May.
Correct.
So,
I thought, are you,
sorry, not the 5th of May.
Yeah, no, he was
Yeah.
talking about the primary.
5th of May, general election.
The order before the board would call the director election for May 5th. In connection with that election, the board will contract with Denton County and Tarrant County to provide election services and conduct the elections. Each of those counties will designate both the early polling locations and election day polling locations. My understanding is they haven't done so yet. They want to conduct the primaries first, then they'll make the final determinations as to where those locations will be.
we are talking about approving the primaries, not
No,
the,
this
The
order
purpose of this order is to call the May 5th general election.
to call it, okay.
Okay, do you want to make a motion for order number?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve, order number 2018-0116A.
Okay, I have a motion to approve order number 2018-116A by Director Hayes, a second by Director Thomas. Any other discussion? I see none. All in favor, show of hands. I have Secretary Treasurer Rose, Director Hayes, Director Thomas, myself, and Vice President Wilson for. Any opposed? I see none. We're moving on to B. Notice of appointment of agent.
I move to approve the notice appointment of agent naming the district secretary, Lori Slott, as the agent.
Okay, I have a motion by Secretary Treasurer Rose to approve the appointment of MUD Secretary.
Second.
Okay, I have a second by Director Thomas. Any discussion? I see none. All in favor? Show of hands. Okay, I have Secretary Treasurer Rose, Director Hayes, Director Thomas, myself, and Vice President Wilson for. Any opposed? I see none. We move on to C. Authorize General Manager to...
C and D together.
Excuse me?
We do C and D together.
I can read fast. Okay. Authorize general manager to sign and execute all necessary documents relating to election. Do I have a motion?
So move.
A second. Okay. Authorize general manager to sign and execute all necessary documents relating to election. Any discussion?
What documents?
It'll be the joint election agreement and the election services agreements.
Got it, thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? I see none. All in favor, show of hands. I have Secretary Treasurer Rose, Director Hayes, Director Thomas, myself, Vice President Wilson for. Any opposed? Show of hands. I see none. We're moving on. D, other necessary actions as may be required for May 5th general election. What does that category include?
To the extent something comes up, this ensures that your staff will be authorized to undertake any actions necessary to conduct the election. We don't anticipate
Just
any.
authorize the general manager to take action, and he can delegate if he has to.
Yeah, it's just so we don't have to wait for a board meeting if something comes up in connection with the election. We don't anticipate any, but it just prevents delays.
I move that the general manager be authorized to take the necessary action as may be required for the May 5th, 2018 general election that have not already been covered in the prior motions.
Okay, I have a motion by Secretary Treasurer Rhodes. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Vice President Wilson. Any further discussion? I see none. All in favor? Show of hands. Secretary Treasurer Rose, Director Hayes, Director Thomas, myself, Vice President Wilson for. All opposed? I see none. Okay, it passes. Okay, 7. Consider and take appropriate action regarding the financing and acquisition of Vector truck for wastewater cleaning, vacuum extraction, and other operations.
I'm going to excuse myself for a short break.
Okay, you want to take a 5-minute break?
Please.
Or 10-minute? We'll say,
5 minutes, 5 work.
okay, 5 minutes. At 8:47, we're going to take a break and come back at, let's call it 8:55.
I just beat the trash man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it's 8:54, and we're back from recess. And we will go to
Number 7.
7. Okay, consider and take appropriate action regarding the financing and acquisition of a Vector truck for wastewater cleaning, vacuum extraction, and other operations. A, adopt resolution number 2018-016, A as an apple, entitled Resolution Regarding a Lease Purchase Agreement for the purpose of financing a sewer truck. B, approve lease purchase agreement and execution by the same by general manager. And C, authorize such action as may be necessary and convenient, including execution of all required documentation for the district to acquire the Vector truck pursuant to the lease purchase agreement. Someone from staff can comment on this?
Mr. President, there's a staff memo in your board packet that regards our process of coming to a recommendation for the board. We've worked with council and with our bank, one of the authorized banks, and a group called Capital Government Delivery, I think is the title of the firm.
Government Capital Corporation.
Government Capital Corporation, to develop these documents. It's my understanding from council that if we wanted to finance anything longer than 3 years on a straight-out loan, we'd have to go and get both the AG's approval and TCEQ. The only alternate provided under state law for that is a lease purchase agreement, which can extend beyond the 3-year period. So the staff had intended to finance this over a period of time that's more reflective of the life cycle of that vehicle. And we have a recommendation in your board packet for which one. And the documents that go along with that are also in the, I believe, in the board packet.
May I ask a couple of questions? Sure. Carmen, I believe you are, the recommendation is the A option of the 3, and that option was $358,000.
Yes, sir, that's correct. We we evaluated all 3 trucks without knowing the price tags.
But again, that's on page 47 of your packet.
It turned out that the lowest cost vehicle was also the one preferred by our frontline staff.
Well, I just got a couple of financial questions for you.
Okay.
On page 47, it was 358,000 5-year lease. But on page 55, the schedule of payments on the lease purchase starts at 100,000. What's the difference between that and the 358? And this schedule is a 10-year schedule, yet you're saying you want to do it on a 5-year lease. Help me.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a 10-year schedule.
No, there's twice a year payments, so it's a 5 years, but similar to your bonds, there's 2 debt service payments.
Yeah, got it. So why does the start rate start $2,000 more?
I believe those are just issuance costs, right? We have,
It's 358,600 on page 47. It's 360,140 cents here on page 55.
I think it's likely that that's the financing agent's way to recover their legal and other costs associated with the transaction. The first number that you saw was the actual vehicle cost.
So in these 12 pages of fine print, I should find that?
No.
just in the same sense that when you issue a bond, you have to pay your finance advisor and the people issuing the bonds a little bit of a commission, if you will. There's an issuance cost associated with the lease purchase
I
agreement.
just didn't see that anywhere as a breakout. It's just
it's a
one number
couple
became
$1,000s.
another number. No explanation for it that I could see.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Yeah, the total at that point would be the addition of $5,311.48 to $360,100.40. Because that's a payment, and the option to purchase after that time is that second amount, so, yeah.
So what's the total dollar amount, the three?
392,
280, 31?
31 cent.
Okay. Does everyone understand that's the total?
Yep.
Purchase is the 358, 640.
And the budget has how much of this already in it?
That'd be a Stephen question, but we anticipated originally financing this over a 3-year period, and we've extended it to 5. So I believe we have excess in this year's budget. In addition, it's my understanding that the chassis gets delivered to the vendor after about 2 months, and then there's almost 3 months of construction time of the Vector component of that. So the first payment, it's not even clear that's going to happen in this fiscal year, if that makes sense. It's, you know, we're going to take delivery of it almost near the end of the year.
So you might not make the first payment in August 1st.
Another offset is the what we could get for the old truck. I mean, we were amazed at what we got from the old fire truck that one year. So, I mean, that'll just offset any cost too.
Don't get your hopes up.
I know you, Mike. You
Somebody
gotta
desperate
stay with the
enough.
fire truck guys, man. Get that top dollar. There's a sucker born every day. Just a little wax polish.
This one is a sucker, I'll tell you that.
Hey.
Tony, you and Carmen can do this after the meeting, but I would like for y'all to point me to how the 358 became 360 within the verbiage.
And
Okay.
if the board's interested in not financing the transaction costs and paying that lump sum up front, so that only the cost of the vehicle are financed, with that direction, I think we can go back to the financer and do so.
I guess I question, how much staff time do we want to burn over $2,000?
Yes, sir.
And I just wanted you to point me after the meeting to the verbiage so I can go read it. I just want to see how it got from 358 to 360.
Okay. Still seeking a motion for.
I make a motion to adopt resolution number 2018-0116A, entitled Resolution Regarding the Lease Purchase Agreement for the purpose of financing a sewer truck.
Not to exceed number.
Not to exceed, total payments of $392,280.31.
Thank you very much. I have a motion by Vice President Wilson, and I will second that motion. Any further discussion?
There are a lot of blank lines in this document.
There's
A lot of
blank
blank
lines.
lines in this
Talking
document.
about the lease purchase agreement.
Yes.
Not on that one yet. That's B,
Oh, I'm sorry.
okay? We're adopting the
Just
resolution.
a resolution. I thought it was
The blank
attached to
line
leach.
on it is the signature block.
Yep, okay.
Okay?
Get 'em all together.
Any further discussion? I see none. All in favor, show of hands. I have Secretary Treasurer Rose, Director Hayes, Director Thomas, myself. Are you voting? Did you have your hand up? Okay. Director Thomas, myself, and Vice President Wilson. Okay, all opposed? I see none. Move on to B. Now you can go with your blank line.
Well, there was,
Lease purchase
first of all, from a prior discussion, clearly this is a TML lease purchase agreement. So this is TML. This is boilerplate. But there's some interesting things in this boilerplate that I think we need to be aware of. One, I'm on page 49, number 4, requires an opinion from council.
Bill, which one are you on? I'm sorry.
That was page 49, number 4. Number 24 on page 52 requires continual financial statements from the finance department. All right, let's see. Now, Exhibit A, we've got the sewer truck as follows. That's description. B's the cost elements. Now we're down to the insurance and indemnity. I have questions there on whether what it calls for my signature, the general manager's and my signature, apparently to verify the seal on that one. Then it says primary use on that same page. I'm on page 56. Primary use apparently is blank. Unless that's a statement that goes, that's a lease statement. No, it says please fill out primary use. I think that needs to be completed. Let's see, is escrow agreement included in this one?
And it looks like they just filled out.
Purchase
the
agreement,
signature.
I don't know whether purchase
names.
agreement goes with escrow agreement or not, but the escrow agreement seems to have the first line blank on it on page 57. Here comes the secretary, and she's got them all filled out.
I don't have the financial stuff filled in, however, there's more information on that document. Legal was supposed to review that yet.
By the way, Tony, on the page
Okay.
that builds on item number 2, it says, leaser has delivered to agent the sum of $358,600, not $360.
What page of the packet?
Page 57. Item number 2. Wait a minute. Yeah, item number 2. Leasor has delivered to agent the sum of $358,600.40. Escrow amount for deposit.
And I think the escrow is the fund that's established for the lease purchase payments for the vehicle. That initial, when you look at the schedule of payment, you'll see that that was an initial payment, separate and apart from the lease purchase payments. Again, that was the transaction fees.
After the meeting, I don't want to take people's time. I just need to see where this difference is.
Okay, I'm back on page 56, where I mentioned that the blank line primary use there. It's filled in here. It says for both hydro evacuation, evacuation in response to main breaks in the water system as well as cleaning sewers in the wastewater collection system. And the date is 16th day of January. Okay, so that's taken care of. On the escrow agreement, which is the next page, it calls for agent.
Which page, Bill?
I'm on page 57.
Okay.
At the top, the blank at the top.
Yep, see it.
So it calls for an agent. And we don't have an agent listed. Do we need an agent listed at this time?
They're working with a third-party bank, which serves as the escrow agent.
So this line would remain blank?
No, my understanding of tonight's agenda item, I'm sorry if I misunderstood, was that the form of the instruments would be put before the board, but that the finalization of all documents would occur after the meeting. But that's clearly wasn't your expectation.
Yeah, I guess my thing's the same. It was my assumption that we're authorizing the general manager to execute this.
Oh, okay.
Unless he's planning on running some type of suction company on the side. I can't think a whole lot of commercial uses for any of these vehicles.
On the acceptance certificate on page 59, it's saying that hereby acknowledges receipt in good condition of all property described on the and we're not accepting delivery on February 1st, 2018. That's the date, the agreement date of the lease. So how does that come?
My understanding, this is the universe of documents. Some of it won't be executed, and for instance, this one won't be executed until it is accepted.
Because it has Carmen's name on it. Okay, I'm with Vice President Wilson.
Yeah, I think we're
authorizing
beating a dead horse. Let them do it. This
Yeah.
is staff work.
If it's the board's preference instead to see everything complete, we can bring it back. That wasn't our expectation.
I don't prefer to do that, please.
Okay.
I make a motion that we authorize, that we approve the lease purchase agreement and execution by the general manager, as well as authorize such actions as may be necessary, including execution of all required documentation for the district to acquire the Vector truck pursuant to the lease purchase agreement.
Okay, I have a motion for B and C.
Second.
And I have a motion by Vice President Wilson and a second by Secretary Treasurer Rose. Any further discussion? I see none. All in favor, show of hands. I have Secretary Treasurer Rose, Director Hayes, Director Thomas, myself, Vice President Wilson, 4. All opposed. I see none. Okay, that's been approved. Okay, we're moving on to 8. Consider and take appropriate action regarding the December 2017 combined financials and variance report. A, combined financials. B, combined variance.
That's me. I have reviewed them, signed some large checks again this month. The only thing, and it's in the variance report, if I can bring that page up, the one item that caught my attention goes to water, and it's for testing equipment.
Page
I haven't found it yet.
145.
Yes. If you got, yeah. When you find it, let us know where it's at. And I'll let the wastewater superintendent talk to the water superintendent talk to the testing equipment there. I think.
What this is a new machine that Hawk has come out with. So right now, it takes us about 4 or 5 different tests to do what this one machine does. We can do the total ammonium, monochloramine, ammonias, nitrates, pHs. This machine does everything, and it'll do it all simultaneously. You can do 4 or 5 tests all at once. So we thought it would be a good investment and a time saver in the long run.
Thank you. And it was testing equipment under furniture. It's carried under the variance report too.
It was equipment. It's under equipment and furniture.
Yeah, okay.
What was under the wastewater, what was the vehicle maintenance for $2,800? Vehicle maintenance to Elite, Mustang Elite car service.
That was the PM on those, the on-call truck and the superintendent truck, both pumps, both trucks, all the PM on them.
We've only got for this month it's $179.47 for vehicle maintenance.
Oh, year total.
Last month was a higher, and that was for a full brake system that was done on the vehicle.
Oh.
For $2,800?
It was brakes, it was drums, it was quite a bit of work.
Seals. Axle seals.
Axle seals.
It was 20-something hundred, I can't remember.
Still $2,800?
$2,600.
There's a lot of things was wrong with it.
Well, there was also a few other things, but I think it was 20-something hundred, and then there was a few other items from some of the other vehicles that got worked on.
When are we supposed to get those trucks? Aren't you getting a truck?
In February.
Everybody gets a truck, right? Okay.
So I move to approve the financial and variance reports.
Second.
Who's second? Okay, have a motion by Secretary Treasurer Rose, a second by Director Thomas. Any further discussion?
No. I was voting.
See?
I'm trying
Okay,
to, I'm trying to push your head.
okay. Okay, I see no discussion. So, all opposed? I see none, so we will move on to the next, is that good enough?
Do all in
Move on to
favor?
the next one.
Please,
Okay.
all in favor.
Reports and updates, General Manager monthly reports and update.
Can you explain the $2,000?
Mr. President, I've included a kind of a revised format for the general manager report in the board packet. I'm trying to make it a little bit more informative. The only thing I really wanted to talk about today falls under the capital improvement project section. But if there's any questions on any of the other updates that I've provided, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Have one?
Yes, sir.
You'd gotten a request, I think, from Danny Mayer about when the items we had agreed to go on our website are gonna go on the website. Has that been done?
Yes, sir, it has been done. We're still working on the format to make it a little bit nicer. So, you know, the update that I have in here really covers it. You know, there was two things that we agreed to do. One of them was to post information about our DMRs, which is our discharge monthly reporting data. We've actually gone well beyond that and have posted things like our consumer confidence report, which we always posted. Our monthly water quality on the drinking water side, we put all that information in for folks. We're working with Michelle, our communication specialist, on trying to provide some context. So for example, if you go and look at our website, you'll see like biomonitoring. The general public is not going to understand what biomonitoring is. I, in a simplistic way, I tend to think of it like the canary in the coal mine. We put certain bugs in the wastewater effluent, and if they don't die, we assume that that's safe.
I thought that was a function of my Fitbit.
Yeah, kind of one of those.
Yeah, okay.
So all of that information is there. We went one step beyond, and in this packet have reported on both breaks and sanitary sewer overflows, which some people would call unauthorized discharges. The fact is, when an SSO happens,
Did you previously authorize that break at Hogan's Glen?
I did not. Did not
I think it's
authorize.
unauthorized.
Yeah.
It was budgeted, though.
It was budgeted.
So I think
we
a better
covered.
question is there anything requested that we agreed to that is not now there?
The only thing that is not done is the application to TCEQ for technical and managerial assistance, which is not due until 120 days after the settlement.
Okay.
I have filled that out. I've got it on my desktop. We just have not submitted it yet. And I
Okay.
don't intend to do it until the day it's due.
You were gonna say something about the SOS?
SSOs.
SSO, excuse me.
Yeah, so, it's kind of the same.
Yeah.
You know, I think one of the important things for the public to know is that a sewer system, if it gets plugged, is designed to overflow, and the fluid comes out of the manholes. So when a sewer system gets plugged, whether it's flushable wipes, whether it's tree roots, whether somebody deep fried a turkey and poured all the oil down the drain and clogged it off with fats, oils, and greases, if the sewer backs up and it comes out a manhole lid, that is in fact working exactly like it was designed. It also turns out to be against the law. EPA came along in the 70s and decided the best way to talk about that was to say, hey, if it's out in the environment, you know, on top of the manhole, that's against the law. So it's a violation. There's a lot of reporting that goes into that. If it's below a certain volume, and I want to say that volume is 55,000 gallons, it's not really a major infraction. The one that we had here that's reported on was 1,100 gallons. It was found, it was fixed, and we moved on. If you look at the list of SSOs for a city like Fort Worth, they have one virtually every day. I mean, the system is so large that they have them on a continuous basis, meaning that their sewers are working exactly like they were designed. They get clogged off, call people out, and we fix them. So I would note that there has not been an SSO in our system recorded since last February. We did have one 2 days before Christmas. So there was a stretch in there of over 10 months where we had no SSOs. So, I would argue that our performance has been high, that the system is running well, and that our active cleaning of the system, which we do on a monthly basis, we're cleaning hundreds of feet of pipe, has gone a long way towards mitigating any of those potential clogs. They're always going to happen. Tree roots love to find warm, nutrient-filled water, and if there's any cracks in the sewer pipes, those roots get in there. Then anything that's flowing through the sewer line can get caught on the roots, plug it up, it backs up and comes out the manhole. I will say this, in my time in Raleigh, North Carolina, we instituted a program where we gave a $25 gift certificate, I think if I remember correctly, they were to a movie house, for anybody who was the first reporter of an SSO. So we depend sometimes on our citizens to say, hey, there's water coming out of that manhole. I'm going to call the mud and get my $25 so I can go see a movie. We may want to look at that in terms of proactively identifying it because, in most cases, we don't know about it till somebody reports it. So I guess that's what
And we self-report. It's not like TCEQ comes out on an inspection and finds it, we self-report those.
That's right.
Is that correct? Okay.
There's a strict self-reporting protocol, has to be done with a certain period of time. There's a volume estimate. If it's above that volume, I think it's 55,000 gallons, correct me if I'm wrong, Carl, but then there's like newspaper requirements. I mean, it's a strict reporting protocol. We're in complete compliance with that.
Okay, I have a question on the update. I don't know if it was probably a couple meetings ago, but there was a question on legal expense. I think you asked it, on the permit.
Page 149.
Right. And then, did we ever account for the staff time in that, or?
We have not. We talked about it, but that becomes a really nebulous estimate, right? How much of a given day did I work on that? We did not track those periods of time. Lori worked a lot harder than I did on the collection of documents and the submission during the discovery process.
And open records?
All the open record stuff that came along with it, and it's, but during discovery in a hearing, they can ask for these documents. At one point, one of the petitioners asked us for every document ever created about the wastewater plant. That's a pretty big stack of documents. And part of it was the design documents that were being replaced. So the plant that's in those drawings no longer exists effectively. So we do not have a good estimate for that.
Okay, so just the 48,134.33 is legal?
It is legal and expert witness.
Okay. And then you have one PUC rate case. I guess that's the winter averaging thing. That was 133,607.75.
Right. So those are the two.
Is that legal, only legal, and?
It's legal and expert witness. There is both.
So it wasn't staff time included in that either?
No.
Correct, okay.
No, sir. And at your request, I had sent out this update on email because I missed the previous board packet. And at your request, I've included that in italics in the general manager report, just to make it a part of the permanent record.
Okay. Anything else?
Would you allow me to interrupt with one statement?
Mr.
13 minutes ago, my daughter-in-law delivered our 13th grandchild, a little girl, 9 pounds, 13 ounces. She is 7 minutes old, or 13 minutes old.
Cool.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Grandpa.
That's why I've been looking at my phone all night.
That's a pound a minute.
I've been waiting on that text.
Where is she born in?
In New Jersey.
New Jersey. Okay, anything else on the update report?
Tax bill is accumulating.
I do have a couple of things on the capital, but I believe Director Rose had a.
I was headed to capital discussion also, so I'll let you lead.
Okay, so just three things. We're trying to make some progress on the wastewater treatment plant. This last week, I met with the Weber Cadagua folks that came in. We're kind of working through the phase issues, and when we had our retreat with Weber Cadagua, the engineer, and our legal counsels, and we talked a lot about phasing, the phasing that's in the contract, the challenges that we've had with them moving on with to phase 2 before phase 1 was complete. We're essentially at a point now where phase 1 and phase 2, at least at the time of this writing, were not complete, but we wanted them to move forward to phase 3 so they can get their work done and move on. In the last few days, we've written a partial substantial completion for phase 1. There's a couple of elements of phase one that are not included in that. They would be the permeate pumps, waste activated sludge pumps, and I believe the membranes themselves are withheld from that. We're also working on a change order with our council, in this case, Matt Sullivan, to work on a change order, no time, no money, to proceed with phase three outside of the sequencing called for in the contract. I believe Matt felt ill last week, and it was pretty cold in Austin today, so I was unable to get a hold of him. I suspect he's out and under the weather, but we're hoping to get that done. They've already started demolition on phase three, and so it's underway. So that's what I wanted to report on with respect to that. Was your question around the wastewater treatment?
No.
On the high service booster pump station, CP&Y is our design engineer, and Mike went out to bid. Lori helped to meet all the requirements for publishing the bid documents in the newspaper. The bids came back quite a bit higher than our budget. We had a $350,000 budget, and the lowest bid came in at $513,700. It was my understanding from Mike and his discussions with CP&Y that perhaps the delivery schedule for some of those elements was what drove the cost up. We'd put in a pretty aggressive delivery schedule relative to getting those pumps in, and some of the vendors had told Mike, we can't get those pumps in half of that time. So, we had to put in extra money to expedite those deliveries. So the team is back at the drawing board right now trying to figure out, we're going to go out rebid it. What do we change in terms of schedule of delivery to try to optimize our costs on that project. And then finally, this is one that I guess we need some feedback from the board on. In our two joint projects with the town, they went out for bid, and the bids came back, January 5th. We had budgeted $410,000. The lowest qualified bid came in at $426,022.50. There was an additive alternative in that bidding process that reflected two of the homeowners, and our pipe in their front yard goes right under a couple of trees. Those trees are growing in our easement, and Tignall Perkins felt that it may be that there would be pressure on the board to bore under those trees as opposed to cut them down and buy them some trees to plant outside the easement. My feeling is that those trees really need to go, and that should not be the expense of the mud or its repairs, but that'll become a political decision at some point in time. The bigger part, though, for me, and it's kind of the first time that I've dealt with this board, is that the bid came in well above our budgeted amount. So we believe that the town is going to want to start working on this project before our next board meeting, and that there may be a need for a special meeting to come in and just approve these bid amounts for that project, as well as potentially a budget amendment, because I'm thinking that's what would happen, or direction to bring back an accumulated budget amendment at some point in time. So I guess that's really what I wanted to share here. Did I miss anything?
Is it, we budgeted 410, but the actual cost is 426 plus the 36?
It'd be plus 36 if we're pressured not to cut down those trees. And this is the additional 36 is if we bore under them so they can be preserved.
How much are the trees if we just bought new trees?
Well, that's, I guess that becomes the point. So trees are always one of those things, people tend to view them as part of the family. And so, Tignall went out and got the bid on that. My feeling is they're in the easement and they ought to just go. That's part of the deal. If they need us to buy some new trees that they would plant outside the easement, then that would be all right.
I was going to say, to me, it makes a difference of what kind of tree we're talking about. Am I talking about one of those little post oaks that's that big around? Or am I talking about two of these guys that are like this?
I think one of them that I saw was probably 12-inch in diameter. And
Probably.
the others weren't quite that large.
Yeah, I guess for me,
We can have a
If you look-
field trip day.
well, I that's staff's job. I don't want to get that involved in looking at trees. I mean, as long as, my thought is if it didn't cost more than $36,000, just buy them new trees, and be done with it. I mean, you can get some awful nice trees for $36,000. Matter of fact, I'll sell you mine in my front yard for $36,000.
I think
It's not worth it, it's a little one.
I think
No,
one
they're
of
pretty
them.
big.
I think there was a few little post oaks. I think one or two of them were Bradford pears,
Oh.
and I think maybe one of them was an oak tree.
Bradford pear has lifespan of about 20, 25 years.
Yeah, it looks like this one
At
is
best.
probably on its
Yeah,
last
so that,
few
I'm
years.
not a huge Bradford pear fan, but some of
Give
these
something,
old
Tony.
oaks around here.
I was just going to say, for agenda and open meetings purposes, I'd request that the board, it sounds like it's going to have this special meeting anyways to discuss the budget and funding issue, and if we could just put this item on that agenda, then deliberate it at that time.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, on wastewater, by the reports, it looks like you're doing some pretty good volume through there, and it hadn't even been rainy.
We're still pushing about 1.1
Yeah,
every day.
that's quite a bit. And then,
A lot.
and then connections, we're up to, I saw that the water, even during December, when we're supposed to be, everything turned off, it increased by 8 million. Does that sound right?
I would have to go back and look. That may be right.
Yeah.
I know we're not doing a whole bunch right now.
Yeah. And then what?
I was gonna comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, we're
just-
supposed to
yeah,
go down at least to what my.
Yeah, we went from 38.5 million a year ago December to 48.1. That's just gonna make a larger divisor when it goes into the cost equation.
Again, we're in winter averaging, so if people are out there, I mean, make sure you watch what water you use. I saw irrigation going off on a couple of houses, and
Likewise.
doesn't make any sense. On connections, what are we up to, like 4,700 or something, 40?
It's
Do you know, Mike, off the top of your head, or,
no.
4712.
okay, so. If
4712
you do a
total.
conservative 2.5 per household, that's like 11,780 people.
I got no idea.
That's my quick math.
Usually about the standard is about 2.8.
Well, it's higher than that,
2.32.
we're over 12,000 then. So, okay.
We don't know.
Website analytics, are we seeing any more volume on that page that has the requested information?
It has not made the top 10 and therefore does not show up on website analytics.
Okay.
That's kind of basically how that,
Well,
that-
the
yeah.
lowest top 10 is 38 views, so it hasn't even got 37, or more than 38.
yes, sir.
Doesn't make too
don't
much
really-
sense on that one, but okay.
see that
Anything
changing.
else?
I want to commend the wastewater treatment staff for another month of excellent results from the plant. Went out for a tour the other day. Everything's looking more shiny and more spiffy out there, and I didn't notice any odor.
Any over what?
Any odor as I walked around, which raises a question. There was an interesting discussion between the general manager and the wastewater superintendent that I witnessed out there. It got into microbiology and growth of foam elements. And did you come up with a resolution? I mean, it was, when you started talking about things weaving themselves together, it was interesting.
Feel free to continue that conversation after the meeting is adjourned.
Got it.
Fill the
And
mental
I agree with Director Rose that, with the cold weather, you usually see the readings go off the chart, and, the little microorganisms don't like to move too fast. So again, good job out there.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Anybody else have anything on this general manager report? I see none. Carmen, you have anything else?
No, sir.
Mike? Carl? Okay.
Stephen?
He's not general manager.
Well, neither are they.
Steven, you got anything?
I'm good.
His part we passed on the finance. Okay, come on, wake up.
I'll learn Monday.
Okay, on executive session, the two items were contractor breach performance and payment issues related to district contract with Weber Cadagua for construction of wastewater treatment plant. Do we have anything on that?
No, sir.
Okay. I requested the B, and the purpose of that was to have the general manager work with the attorney to come up with some sort of history for Westlake residents to come and view why they're in our district, how they became in our district, and why they pay the taxes they do. Does anyone have any problem with that? So,
That's
putting
an
together-
executive session?
no, I wanted his input on some legal issues, but I don't need to ask him. So,
We don't need to go in executive
okay.
session.
So, does anyone have any problem with, well, I'll make a motion on 10B to direct the general manager to work with our attorney in coming up with a document that can be posted on our webpage for our district residents that live in Westlake. Just a
My-
history.
In my guess, it will be viewed even less than the other documents.
I think at least 51 times.
I don't understand the purpose.
To provide an informational for Westlake residents, so they don't have to call or send emails to the staff or directors asking why they pay district taxes.
Okay, so now I've reviewed the attorney's fees and written his checks for last month. Does this need to go to the attorney?
I'm directing the general manager, okay, if needed, to get with the attorney, okay? That's my motion. Does anyone have any problem with it? Then don't make a second. Do I have a second? Anyone? I see none, so we'll drop it. It was just informational for the website for Westlake
feel
residents.
We already,
Proceed.
No
If
second.
not,
Okay.
don't.
Okay. Consider and take appropriate action on all matters deliberated in executive. We have none. Items for future agenda. Anyone? Did you have anything that you want to put on? Okay. We're moving on. No future agenda. So no future meetings, I guess. 13, set future meeting dates. Regular board meeting on February 20th, 2018 at 6:30. Is that okay with everyone?
If I could ask Lori and Mike, do we have a sense of what day we might like to have that special meeting? It'd be really quick, just to kind of look at either, well, not either, a budget amendment and
Calendars,
to
for
approve the joint projects with the town. They want to get started on that.
Does the board feel that that meeting should be at night to approve the town project with Teagnall and Perkins and award the contract?
Doesn't matter.
Could we do it in the morning?
I won't be here for it, so, everyone else is local, so you guys could probably have it whenever.
I was actually thinking I was gonna talk to Mike before the meeting about, Carmen and I spoke about it.
You can just send an email
Yeah,
out.
let's just do an
Yeah, do you want me
email
to send
on it.
an email? We'll send
Yeah.
it next
Okay,
week
so
sometime.
Lori's gonna send an email out to the directors with a date and time and see who can make it, okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, how about the
I make-
February 20th?
I
You gonna
think
be
we're
here?
good. Yeah, I'll be here back on the 20th.
Okay, anyone else? February 20th, next meeting? Is that okay? Okay, so next meeting will be February 20th, 2018 at 6:30, and,
I make a motion to adjourn.
okay,
I'll second.
we'll adjourn at 9:35.